start.
That referral does not go to council.
It does not go to council.
It won't?
No.
Oh, okay. I was told otherwise. Okay.
No, that's looking for additional work to be done. It's referring it right back to staff.
Oh, okay, okay. I was told otherwise.
There was not to.
We're going to get started. I think we've got quorum. 1, 2, yes, we have quorum. Okay, so I'd like to call this meeting of the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee to order. Welcome everyone, especially our committee members and other members of council. We've got 14 items on today's agenda, so it's quite a hefty agenda. And again, those for you who are in the room, you can see the real-time updates, as well as those watching online can follow us at www.toronto.ca/council. Any declarations of interest for this agenda? Seeing none, I will move on to confirmation of minutes from the last meeting. Who would like to confirm those minutes? Councillor Holladay, our Vice Chair, has confirmed the minutes. All in favor? That's unanimous. Now we're going to run through the agenda. And I think we have some deputants here today, some speakers on some of these items. So we'll start at the very top, PW 28.1, non-competitive exclusive rights contract. And this is related to the accessible pedestrian signals and the central control units. I'll move that if the committee's okay with that. All in favor? That carries. Next item is PW 28.2, amendment of purchase order number 6044159 for Ashbridges Bay Treatment Plant phosphorus removal upgrades. Would somebody like to move that item? Councillor Chin Lee. All those in favor? That carries. PW 28.3, non-competitive agreement with Toromont Industries, and that's related to the Humber Treatment Plant and the equipment maintenance. Councillor Lee moves that. Thank you, Councillor Lee. All those in favor? That carries. PW 28.4, consent to assignment of the Environmental Limited Agreement dated March 14th for professional services for biosolids, haulage, and beneficial use. I will move that unless anybody has any concerns. Seeing none, all those in favor? That carries. PW 28.5, York Region Agreements for water servicing and ownership transfer of the Maple Collector Sanitary Trunk Sewer. Any concerns with that? Councillor Lee moves it. All in favor? That carries. PW 28.6, sewer system flood reduction measures in the Rock Cliff area.
Madam, yes, if
you wanted to hold
someone
that.
Hold the item down for me, please. Thank
you. Councillor Holladay is holding that item, so we'll hold that in his name. Councillor Holladay, and we'll move on to our next item. PW 28.7, road classification amendments. All those in favor? Councillor Carmichael Grubb is moving it, and all those in favor? That's, again, carries. PW 28.8, I'm going to hold this in my name as the chair for speakers. So we'll hold 28.8, and that is State of Toronto's Blue Bin Recycling Program. PW 28.9, review of single-serve coffee pods in the City of Toronto's Waste Diversion Program. And again, I'm going to hold that in my name because we've got speakers on that item. And PW 28.10, through Prohibition Farm Greenway at Victoria Park Avenue. And that is moved by Councillor Holladay. All those in favor? That carries. PW 28.11, revised free-floating car share pilot and interim policy. I'll hold that in my name again. as we have speakers on that item. It's a big agenda. PW 28.12, moving forward an action plan to improve safety and opportunities for peds and cyclists in Ward 11. A report from the Ward 11 Pedestrian Safety and Cycling Committee. What a report that is, very impressive. And I understand you'd like me, I'll hold that for you?
Yes, and there is other deputation.
Oh, is there? Okay.
Yeah.
I know you were interested in that one, obviously, given it's your ward. And PW 28.13, cycling network implementation in Thorncliffe Park and Flemington Park. Again, we've got speakers on that item, so I'll hold that in my name. PW 28.14, this is the pilot bike share program in Southeast Scarborough. I know we have speakers on this. Councillor Ainsley has a commitment back in his hometown, in his ward, that he has to get to. And I would support this being moved up on the agenda simply because it was deferred from the last meeting, as you were aware, and I think that's a fair approach. So if the committee's okay with that, I would move that up to the top, or close to the top, as close as we can get to the top of the agenda. Okay, there sounds like there's support for that, Councillor Ainsley, so we'll do that near the beginning. And again, I'll hold that in my name because it's we've got speakers on that, a couple speakers. So lots of speakers today. Okay, so Councillor Mamalides' favorite thing, there's a request for an addition to the agenda from Joe Mahevic. It's on a pink piece of paper. He did approach my office about this to ask to have it put on. I think it was yesterday, maybe the day before. There's issues on this street, but I think it's more complex than it appears, given some of my conversations, late night conversations with some staff. My understanding is it's very complex, this
Point of
issue.
order.
And possibly costly, and possibly will defer other capital projects. So we have to just figure out a way to approach this. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Mamalidi. You're not very loud today.
I don't want to be loud.
Somebody tweet that.
I can be if you want. I can be if you want me to. Madam Chair, this is out of order. Not only is it submitted at the last minute, but it talks about infrastructure, it talks about the possibility of changing infrastructure. It has no place here to begin with. This is merely an attempt to sneak on a very expensive renovation to someone's ward. And if you allow this, I'm going to keep doing this myself with every single infrastructure new project that I might think of in Ward 7. So you're going to create
Well, I think it's
precedent
not just me, Councillor Mamalidi, it's the committee
Ridiculous.
has to decide. I wish I had that kind of power, but I simply don't and never will. So it's the committee has to decide. But in conversation with staff, there's a lot more to this puzzle, and it could end up actually being disruptive to other capital works projects in other wards and schedules.
No, my point is that it's out of order because it sets a precedent too. If you accept this, what it means is any one councillor can bring forward any pet project they might have on infrastructure and bring it forward without going through the process at City Hall. If you accept this, I'm telling you now, I am going to submit probably 16 or 17 of these motions in the near future to this committee.
So I'm going to move that we introduce it to the committee. I'm not sure if I'm going to vote for it or maybe put forward a motion that's a bit more, I think a motion along the lines of having Transportation Hydro, the local councillor and the local residents work together towards creative solutions would be maybe less prescriptive than what we have before us. Well, it's not even on the agenda, so I can't. I'm moving it, I'm introducing it because I said I would. I don't know if it's in order. I'm not sure we have the clerk, if the clerk could comment on that. The clerk says it is in order.
It's in order. We can introduce infrastructure projects in our wards here at committee whenever we want.
No, it's not. It's very site specific. It's really one street. So it's very, very localized. Okay, so what's the committee think on this? Have you had a chance to review it?
I mean, there's not even an amount on it.
Yeah, there's a number of other parties that have concerns about it. And again, I just found out about those concerns last night. So, like at 8, you know, even a little bit, some of the concerns this morning about the implications of this. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to introduce it, because I said I would, and then I'm going to vote against it. Or if somebody else wants to craft a motion that's a bit more broad
Point of order.
strokes, yes.
Madam Chair, I don't mean to be difficult, but I think you need to rule it out of order. It's specific to one ward, and if you're allowed to do this, then I'd like to know that. If you're...
Okay, so Councillor Mammoliti, I'm going to let the clerk has just arrived, so I'm going to ask her to speak on this matter.
It's easy to vote against it, but I'd like to know whether it's in order, right?
Motion to introduce the item is in order. Although the issue has arisen in a local area, it is a citywide issue that he's brought to the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee. The councillor has brought this for the consideration as it's a citywide issue. The request is citywide, even though it arose out of a local issue.
Having said that, the committee just literally saw this just now, and it might have broader, it sounds like it has broader impacts than we understand. Go ahead, yes.
May I speak to the introduction?
Sure.
So I would like to place the point that it is a complex matter at first read of this, although we've had it for a minute or two. I have some reservations. However, I think I will side with the choice of introduction, because my fear is if we do not do that, it will be introduced as a member's motion. And I'm glad that it's at least come to the committee first, even though it was late, literally last minute. And I agree with the chair in that I'm not so sure that I support the recommendation, because I think that appears to be a whole lot of work, and I would like to understand what that means much better.
Okay, so I'm going to move to introduce the item to the committee, because that request has been made. So I'll ask the committee to vote on that. So all in favor? There's 1, 2 votes, I think, 3, doesn't matter. Okay, so that carries. It's introduced to the committee, and then I think we should vote on, should we vote on this right now too? Because we have a big agenda ahead of us. So would you like to just vote on this right now? Or anybody, any motions you want to move?
Move to receive.
Move to receive?
Cannot receive it.
Cannot
Contains
receive it.
communication. If the motion fails,
Yeah.
it will go to council.
Oh, so if the motion fails, it goes to council. Refer it to staff. I think that's a good idea. I'm going to move. Oh, do you want to move the motion, Councillor Holliday?
Refer it to staff for their consideration.
Okay, all those in favor? That carries. And that item is dealt with. Okay, so we'll go back to our regular agenda. So, we promised Councillor Ainsley we would move him up on the item, on the agenda. Councillor McMahon.
There is another item for new business that was sent yesterday, apparently.
Okay, I don't have anything. I have only this. Okay, let's move on to the next item, and then we'll come back to you, Councillor McMahon. So let's move to the speakers on this item, which was a deferral from our last meeting that went overtime and ran out of time. I think we lost quorum because Councillor Peruzza had to leave. I'll come back to you. PW 28.14, Pilot Bike Share Program in Southeast Scarborough. We have a speaker on it. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the speakers here. Oh, Miroslav. Is Miroslav here? There he is. Welcome, Miroslav. We're going to give you 5 long minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes, sir.
You're on.
I actually live in Scarborough East, and I'm sure all the emails you got on this agenda item is they agree with the motion. I have a Bixi. It used to be called Bixi when I got the membership. I used to call it Bike Share Toronto. I should have the option of taking public transit, driving, or even biking to go shopping, to go to work, or even come here. If I go visit my sister in Etobicoke, of course I'm not going to bike because Scarborough to Etobicoke is really, really far. You know, but there should be the option. I have always pushed for bike share to be expanded to all the subway stations, GO stations, and everywhere from Etobicoke to Scarborough, including Ward 32, Councillor McMahon's ward. That's the best ice cream shop in your ward, you know. Anyways, it's good exercise. It's another option for people to move around. It works well in Councillor Layton's ward, so people don't have to drive around, and parking is expensive. I'm not saying it should be the only option, but it should be one of the options that people in Scarborough East should have. You know, Councillor Ainsley has an option of taking GO Transit. I would love to take a big C bike share here if I had a chance. You know, just another option. And a lot of my neighbors have emailed Councillor Ainsley's office asking to bring bike share Toronto to Scarborough East. Thank you.
Okay, wow, record time. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll move to our next speaker, Hamish Wilson. Is he here? I don't see him. Okay, we're going to move to our next speaker, Emmett Mitchard from Drop Bike. Welcome. Yeah, just make sure your mic's on. And
Hello?
yeah, there you go. Okay, you can start. And just watch that clock. You have 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you, everyone, for letting me be here. This is the first time I am addressing a committee, so thank you very much. I have a bit I'd like to say specifically. My name's Emmett Meacher, and I come from a company called Drop Bike, which is a local company here. So we are headquartered and founded in Canada. We're headquartered right here, and we're made up of entirely Torontonians. You might be wondering what Drop Bike actually does. There are a few things that are different about our bike sharing than others. So first, our smart bikes have GPS and Bluetooth technology embedded in them. This fundamentally changes the conventional bike share model that we see today. This allows us to share extensive data sets with cities, provide ridership data that is not currently collected or cannot currently possibly be collected, and that can help the city make critical infrastructure decisions. Two, Drop Bike does not believe in a retail model of biking. This means that our model does not depend on making profits of selling bikes to cities, as it does now. We also have expertise in operations. Some cities, we have a fully operated system ourselves in Kingston, and there are some new ones down the line. And finally, and this I think is the most important thing that should be said in front of this committee here, setting up the Toronto bike share system that would be powered by a Drop Bike fleet would cost more than 10 times less than what you are currently paying now for your bike share system. With the last investment of $4.9 million for 80 station and 800 bikes, with that amount of money, Drop Bike could have provided tens of thousands of bikes, thousands of stations, and likely served the entire city of Toronto. In under 10 months, we've accomplished a lot. Last year, the board of directors for the TRCA gave us approval to enter into an agreement with Drop Bike and bring our smart bike sharing to their park locations. We were recently approved by the City Council in Kelowna, BC to deploy 1,500 bikes as well. The City of Oshawa approved us on Monday night for a final approval. And we became the first city ever to partner with a city in North America to provide this kind of smart bike sharing. With all that said, we would love to work with the City of Toronto and all the other stakeholders to help scale our city's bike share system to all wards and achieve these kind of goals much quicker. We are happy to help and work under the Toronto Bike Share brand, become a technology provider for the Toronto Bike Share. As a team, we'd love to offer our time to anyone in the city who would find it helpful to consult with us. I believe there are many. And for all of these lessons we've learned, perspectives, and operational teach we have, we think it would be helpful, especially on this issue with a potential bike ward pilot. I think it presents a perfect opportunity for the City of Toronto to try a new technology. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's maybe a question. No? Okay, I'll just ask, have you had an opportunity to meet with staff in our cycling unit, or I know it's run out of a different, it's Toronto Parking Authority, but have you had a chance to meet with our cycling staff at all, or?
No, we've had a very difficult time actually speaking to the staff at Toronto City Hall. We believe that what we've created here in Toronto can do a massive amount of work for the city and really help things go a lot farther and quicker. But we have not had any kind of substantial meeting to date over a year of requests.
Okay, and what about the Toronto Parking Authority? Have you had an opportunity to meet with them?
Unfortunately, no. The person who runs the Toronto Biking Authority says that he is unable to meet with us for whatever reason. As we know, other people are not interested in bike share at the TPA.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation today. It was very interesting and an interesting concept. So I think staff are all here today and they've heard it, and hopefully there'll be some connection with you down the road. Oh, now we have a question from Councillor Mamalady. Go ahead.
Sir, have you, when the original bid came forward with the Toronto Parking Authority, did you bid for it?
No, we weren't a company. We're only about a year old. We're brand new.
Okay, so you recognize that they're in a contract at this
Absolutely.
particular time?
Absolutely. We understand that there are contracts, there are processes for these kind of things. We do not understand why they have to continue when clearly there are better options out there. This is a technology that's kind of perforating the whole world at this point. There's 50,000 smart bikes in Dallas, Texas, which is pretty cool.
Well, just want you to know that I totally agree with you, that something needs to happen a lot better and a lot sooner. Mm-hmm. So I'm on the same page with you. There's a contract out there right now.
Completely understood, yes.
Thanks.
Okay, we've got another question for you from Councillor Holiday.
Thanks for speaking to us. So one of the things with the technology, I mean, technology is changing. We crave data at the city to help us make informed decisions. Can you tell me a little bit about what type of data the company can offer the city if a program such as yours was implemented and how it works?
Yeah, sure. So currently right now what we have are dock systems, and they're the smart part of the system. Now they're not too smart, but they can tell you when things are showing up to certain locations and when they're leaving and then when that bike left another location. For us, we don't use docks necessarily to organize the system. Our bikes are extremely convenient. They can be locked anywhere within certain rules. So with that, we have active GPS on our locks, which allows us to virtually get almost every piece of information that you would want. The exact route that people are going, how fast they're going. We can even tell you the altitudes. We can show you the exact routes that people are traveling through the city. Which from a city's perspective, the data would be incredible for where you should actually be placing bike lanes and things, the roads that people are actually using. So it gives you much more of a dynamic view instead of just sort of a static view of where the bikes are right there. Does that make sense?
And yeah, so how does it work with the lock? I saw one of your bikes, kind of neat. It's got this mechanism and a bar that slips through the spokes, if I recall. Mm-hmm. How does that work, and how do you keep it charged? Because it must be a battery, and
yeah,
does it have like a SIM card in it that relays the information, and how do we get that stuff from you?
Yeah, there is a SIM card in it. There is one.
Oh, there you have it, guy.
Sure. So the lock itself is a smart lock. It's a proprietary lock that we've kind of created. How it works is it has a SIM card. It's internet enabled, so it's attached to our servers. What you do is you walk up to the lock itself. You take out your drop bike app. You scan the lock using a QR code. It immediately authenticates who you are, and then you're able to open that lock. It opens automatically for you, at which point the bike would be unlocked and you're free to take it wherever you'd like. That lock pings back to our servers on a constant basis to tell us exactly where that bike is, what user is riding it. It can tell us the battery levels and different things. The battery on the bike is solar powered. We also have a backup battery inside, but we have a solar power on our front baskets that keep the locks going or powered. At which point, say you're done your ride, you've taken it where you'd like to go, you leave your bike in the appropriate place, which is infrastructure, and then you would close the lock, and it automatically ends your ride, and we handle all the payment and everything seamlessly via the mobile app.
Do I have to have a cell phone to make this work?
No, we offer cash options for our city, so we work with many other cities, so this is a big thing, accessibility. So we provide a cash option. You can have a smartphone. You can also have just a normal phone and actually you can do it through SMS texting, so you can just text us the bike number. We'll have authenticated your phone number already. And we're working on a couple different ways to continue to provide the accessibility to this kind of system.
Yeah, so if I want to go with my kids, they don't have cell phones, and assuming they're big enough to ride the bike, that's okay. Like, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio of cell phone to rider, or is it?
It's not a 1-to-1 ratio, so one person can unlock multiple bikes, yes.
And do you get all the same data harvesting even if you don't have the cell phone?
Yeah, because it's from our locks, it's not from you.
So the lock is like cell phone technology.
Yeah, it's basically a little cell phone in there.
And what's the lifespan of your bikes?
We are saying that our bikes can last 3 years. They're all still good. We've only obviously been able to test them for one riding season. We expect that they'll last 3 years. The price of our bikes are drastically reduced, so we do have the ability to replace them on a more constant basis than, say, the Toronto Bike Share bikes.
Okay. I think that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. I've been very curious about this new business, this idea, and I would encourage you to reach out to all the councillors to meet with us. So what municipalities are you in already, did you say?
Yeah, so last year, we piloted our programs in Kingston, Ontario. We did have a fleet at U of T, and then we were in West Quebec, which is a little town inside the town of Montreal. This year, we'll be rolling out in Kelowna, BC. There's another contract on the West Coast. There's another big contract out here, and then we just signed up with the city of Oshawa. We're currently going through the public procurement process for this Kingston, Ontario, as well as the region of Waterloo.
Great. And, you know, I can see a lot of upside to your bikes and your service. What's the feedback been, and is there any downside?
Yeah, so I think the feedback last year was that our bikes weren't great. Obviously the bikes themselves the lock is really the power in this technology. That lock could go on anything. It could go on a wheelchair, it could go on a mountain bike like you'll see at the TRCA. So we didn't have the highest quality bikes. We've reinvested. We have our 3rd generation bikes now, which are much larger. They're built a little more for the Canadian market. The tires themselves are puncture proof, they're airless. It's all proprietary. It's all anti-theft locks, anti-theft bolts, everything like that. So the main feedback we got was bikes aren't great, so we've upgraded the bikes. And then the second one has to do with some organization and some operational issues because they're completely free-floating, these bikes. But we've changed our lock to have a cable lock, so that incentivizes users to have to leave it up against something, as well as we've put a lot more visual cues into our kind of user experience.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. How does one know that you exist without, unless you randomly walked by an orange bike?
Yeah, well, that's a helpful actually piece of marketing. Our orange bikes, people are very curious about. Other than that, we have to wait. We don't have permission from you guys to launch in Toronto, and we don't want to do this. We don't want to do it without permission. In the other cities, what we've done is we've worked together with the city in parallel to provide communication plans and different things to explain this is a new public service and this is something you can do. We ourselves advertise on social media and different other marketing channels as well.
And you've reached out to our cycling department and our transportation services, and you haven't?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, quick question, Councillor Mamalady, because you didn't use your 5 minutes.
Is this subsidized? Are you expecting the municipality to give you money?
So I think there's multiple ways you could go about doing this. We don't have the capital to put 20,000 bikes or something in Toronto and cover the city tomorrow. If that was the policy goal, we could do it a lot quicker, with subsidies. But we can grow our systems naturally with, rider revenue and things.
What's the difference between yours and the current system that we have then?
So the current system uses those docks, which are where you have to push the bike in and out. We don't have any infrastructure. Those docks cost tens of thousands of dollars, and so we just remove that cost completely. We massively reduce the cost, and then we can provide our riding. So we provide our rides at $1 an hour, which is much less than the
So what's the difference between you and the current partnership we have?
Partnership where?
We're currently subsidizing the system that we have now.
Yes, you're buying the system, yeah.
So what is the difference between what we're doing with them and what you would expect?
Oh, I see. Okay. I guess it depends on what the City of Toronto would like to do. We believe at Drop Bike that only one bike share system can successfully work inside of a city. And I believe what the Bike Share Toronto should do is look into our technologies and other similar technologies to see if they can start reducing costs and expand to other wards, just not using their docked model.
Would you need an agency like the Parking Authority to be able to to do what you need?
Well, surely we would need to talk to somebody that currently runs the Toronto Bike Share program, of course, because we would need to know what they're thinking and what their processes look like.
You wouldn't be able to do it on your own?
We haven't been able to do it on our own to date, correct?
Everybody in the world wants subsidies. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's all the questions for you. Thank you for coming today.
Oh, may I apologize. I actually misunderstood your last question.
Oh,
I'm sorry. What I meant to say is we haven't been able to speak to Toronto Bike Share by ourselves alone. We can launch this program by ourselves without financial help in the city of Toronto. We can't cover Toronto on day one, but we could expand it eventually, yes.
what you're saying, just to be clear, because you've actually said the opposite.
Complete opposite.
Yeah.
Oh.
You actually can run as a business without subsidy, but you wouldn't be able to cover the entire city, which we're not doing anyway, as you just saw from what you see from this item right now. So you could operate as a small business.
Yeah, we could, but we don't think that's going to be the successful model. The successful model is going to be Toronto Bike Share looking into new technologies. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. I see Hamish is here now. Hamish, if you want to come up.
Thank you.
You've got 5 minutes.
Yes, good morning. I wasn't sure. I thought this would probably be sometime in the afternoon. I didn't see any queue on the agenda, the electronic. Maybe I missed it, and I don't think there was an email necessarily saying this would be the top of the morning. But top of the morning to you.
You can speak to Councillor Ainsley because he stomped his feet and said this must be at the top.
Okay.
He's
well,
gotta
here
go
I
back to
am.
Scarborough. He's
Yep.
got to get back for an important event.
Yep. No, it's great. Here I am. Thank you. And thanks for hauling in everybody. Overall, I think this is a pretty good idea. We should go ahead and do this without reservation. Just a broad concern, though, is are the road conditions in Scarborough going to be safe enough for cyclists? Because if you look at the stats, there seems to be a real issue with a lot of roadkill and harm to pedestrians and cyclists there. So that's a real issue. Are we actually going to have a safe enough environment for people to be cycling in? And I'm sufficiently old that I have paper. This is the 2001 bike plan for the Scarborough area. It actually has a pretty considerable network proposed. And I just wonder how much of this has been done. I think maybe the on-road section is perhaps 10% done, if that, and it might be maybe 5 or 6 million to repaint the lanes to do it. So that would be cheap, and you almost should have done that ahead of actually having the bike share, perhaps. Those are the lists of the actual lane kilometers. I think it might be maybe again $6 million to do it. You look to a newer map. Will this actually show up? You know, there's a lot of off-road done, but the on-road is pretty Spartan. So given the costs of, say, things like a Scarborough subway extension where is it? I think they're suggesting that every new rider, if it gets built, is going to be $1.45 million. To repaint the lane lines in Scarborough, all of Scarborough, would be a real bargain. So let's go ahead and do this, but also, is it going to be safe enough? Thank you.
That's it?
Yep.
Okay. That was very brief. Any questions for Hamish? Seeing none, I'm going to move then into speakers. Questions of staff. Oh, there's a question for staff. So go ahead, Councillor Holladay.
May I ask staff to comment on the notion that the bike share program runs at an operating loss? That is, it isn't generating enough revenue to cover its costs. Can you comment, could the staff comment, my apologies, on whether or not expanding into Scarborough makes the situation worse or better? And why there hasn't been a push to do that so far?
Through the chair, thank you for your question, Councillor. The bike share system, as approved by Council for the operation by the Toronto Parking Authority, does operate at a loss. The operating loss is covered by the Transportation Services capital budget, and those transfers happen as per Council direction through the budget process. That was the Council decision when the transfer to Bixby and the Toronto Parking Authority took place. expansion process that the Toronto Parking Authority is currently undertaking for expanding the bike share system in more wards across the city is proceeding based on a data-driven study that they completed in 2016 with financial support from Metrolinx, the Public Transit Infrastructure Fund from the federal government, and to some extent from the city as well as developers. The current plan does not include the area proposed in Councillor Ainsley's motion. The data did not support expansion to this area, that trips would not generate enough revenue to have the bike share system be operational in this area without a substantial operating loss. So there are operating losses, and we don't think that based on the data that's been undertaken to date on the feasibility to expand, that this area would make sense at this time.
Thank you, and if I have time for a follow-up, someone came to speak to us today about a different bicycle technology that is reported to be less costly. I wondered if you could comment through the chair on any research you've done on other technologies and any work you've done to examine a business case to switch technologies to something like what was talked to us, or what was presented to us today.
Thanks, Councillor. We did meet with bike share, drop bike staff, back in May of 2017 to understand their interest in expanding to Toronto, the partnership that they had at the time with the University of Toronto Students' Union. So staff have met with representatives of the drop bike company that spoke with PWIC today. The original or the most recent contract through a request for proposals process that the Toronto Parking Authority undertook did include some bidders that have a non-docked system, so a dockless system. And it was through the competitive evaluation of that process, those systems did not win this contract.
Is there any future to continue looking at different technologies of dockless systems? I recognize that at the time of the tender and the specifications were the specifications, but things keep changing. I keep hearing different things every day about what's available and what's out there. Is there a future, or are we really just looking to continue what we've got right now?
Thanks, Councillor. Through the Speaker, there's certainly a future for advances in technology as long as the right contracts are in place to have those types of technology advancements in this industry. The City of Hamilton, when they undertook a contract for bike share systems, actually just prior to Toronto's, they have a contract with a dockless system. So it works for some cities, and I think there's certainly scope to expand when the contract terms would allow.
And when is that?
The Toronto Bike Share, through the Toronto Parking Authority, most recently got their contract last year, so there's several years left in that contract at this time. And
is it a time-based or is it a volume-based? So we purchased X number of units in docks, or is it the vendor is the exclusive supplier from date to date?
Through the Speaker, it's a bit complex because there's both the actual product as well as the operator, so those two contracts have different lifespans. The Toronto Parking Authority would have to speak to those details.
Thank you.
So when is the contract up?
I don't have that detail. The Toronto Parking Authority would have to speak to it. They do operate the program.
The boundaries that exist currently, where these bikes are currently located, what are the boundaries?
The program is in active expansion. I believe the most easterly boundary is Victoria Park.
And northerly?
Northerly is just north of St. Clair, and westerly is around the Humber Bay Shores area.
So the majority of the city isn't really taking advantage of this bike share program. It's captured into one small area, right?
It has been expanding over time, but you're right, it is a limited area for the city.
Well, do you envision that the suburbs will be captured with this particular program that we have in the near future?
Through the Speaker, the expansion plans that were undertaken by the Toronto Parking Authority and the feasibility study did show the opportunity to expand, particularly up to York University, to other satellite areas. Depending on the level of funding that comes into that system, it will be within the next 5 years.
Right, maybe more, right? So this particular program was started by a private venture, right? Initially? Before the parking authority took it over?
The Bixby program, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yes.
What happened to that?
They went bankrupt and the city made a relationship to acquire the assets.
So they went bankrupt, and then the city said, hey, parking authority, we would like you to take this over and try to make it work with sponsorship, right?
That's my understanding.
And we're running at a loss right now?
It was always projected to run at a loss, which is consistent with bike share systems in other North American cities.
So if this were the private sector, would it be out of business again?
Through the Speaker, these types of programs in partnership with cities, they serve to extend the public transit system, which also runs with public
So
investment.
it's clear subsidy.
It is subsidized, yes.
But yet the majority of our city aren't able to capture this subsidy to have the bike share program in their neighborhoods.
Through the Speaker, it's operating at a place where it wouldn't be fully subsidized, and the feasibility study is trying to expand in a smart way so that it doesn't undertake further losses.
So the subsidy comes from all taxpayers, right?
Through the Speaker, some of the subsidy is about capital investment that comes from other levels of government as well.
But all taxpayers pay for it.
That's correct.
But let me say this again, but yet the majority of this city doesn't have the privilege of having the bike share program in their neighborhoods.
That's correct, Councillor.
So my constituents are paying for something they don't get any benefit to for the most part, unless they come downtown and want to ride a bike.
That's correct. There's a limited
Right.
scale of the system at this time.
Okay. So in dealing with the parking authority, at least when I was there, I was told that the suburbs are probably never going to get it with the system that we have in place.
The 2016 expansion plan feasibility study did include expansion to suburban areas.
So shouldn't we be looking at a system that the whole city could be taken advantage of, instead of one that's just pocketed in the downtown part of the city? If my taxpayers are paying for this, why shouldn't they have the same sort of benefit?
Through you, Chair, I think that what we've learned from looking at other North American cities and bike share is that although perhaps geographically based, bike share doesn't exist in every neighborhood in the city today. The areas where it serves are where we have the most population, because to your point about subsidy and trying to have the balance between access to the bike share system and the least amount of subsidy, you want multiple rides per bike per day. And so when TPA looks to expand into suburban areas, they're looking at the capacity for growing
There's
that
no
capacity.
clear plan for that, is there?
There is, TPA
So
is looking at it.
when
as
is the
an
date that the
expansion.
suburbs, when is the actual date that the suburbs are going to see the bike share plan in their neighborhoods?
So, Councillor, we are actually coming back to PWIC with a report on dockless bike share in the May PWIC agenda, and we can do a little bit more research with TPA to try to get some of those questions more specifically answered for you.
That would be really good, because when I was there were no dates set. In fact, they said that with this current program that we have, the suburbs will probably not get any benefit at all from this program.
And I think they are looking certainly at where it makes sense to expand, given the what I mentioned in terms of having minimizing the subsidy and maximizing the ridership. And I've just been alerted that that report is actually coming in June, not in May.
Will that report talk about pilot projects like the one we're looking at right now to include other parts of the city?
We're in the process of putting that report together right now, and so we can certainly inform it based on this discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Beata?
I guess I missed it when you were the outside councillors, but just a question. So in the recommendation, it talks about potential partners in the report from the councillor. So just a question. The partners, financially, they would contribute, correct? Is that the way it's worded?
Through the Speaker, Metrolinx as a partner does contribute to the capital expansion.
Right.
They have not contributed to the operating subsidy to the program. And there would have to be There would have to be discussions with other potential partners that are mentioned in the motion, such as U of T Scarborough and Centennial College, but those are not typically the types of partners that would subsidize operating programs.
So we don't know if there would be a financial contribution with the other partners at this point.
Through the Speaker, Metrolinx has provided some clear guidance to the Toronto Parking Authority about what their investment should go to from a capital perspective, that it needs to be centered around GO Station and TTC expansion.
But operating, though?
Operating, they have not supported.
They have not?
No, they have not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think that's our last question for staff. Oh, Councillor Lee, I didn't see. Sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. The request here is for a report coming back. There's no timeline on this. Do we have an idea of when you can report back on this?
Through the Speaker, we could certainly comment on the concept of this pilot and the report to come back in June on other bike share related matters, but to undertake partnership development with stakeholders would take a longer time period.
Okay, so it could possibly come back early next year then? Or will it? Because we only have 3 more public meetings. So next year, early next year? Okay. So the proponent is saying yes, next year. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move from questions to speakers, and if the committee doesn't mind, I'd like to just go first, just because I want to show you the motions I'm proposing, but I guess if there's any outside speakers, I guess Councillor Ainsley, I've consulted with you on this, so I'll just show you that's what I'm proposing, and then maybe we can go back to outside to councillors who aren't on committee. But I'll just let you know, I was going to propose that we refer this to staff, meaning Councillor Ainsley's issue, and then also in the same report, ask them to tag on this issue that we've heard from a deputant today about the dockless bike sharing. So I'll just leave, we'll just hold that, and then we'll go back to Councillor Ainsley. I'm just going to speak from the... Okay. Oh, you have visuals? Do you have pictures for us?
I have a few pictures, maps.
Wow. Exciting.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I want to thank everyone for moving this ahead in the agenda. I actually do have to be in Scarborough at an event. Very exciting event that Mayor Tory's holding with a private donor that are going to be naturalizing some of our hydro corridors. What I'm asking today is to consider requesting a report of staff for bike share, a pilot project in southeastern Scarborough. And as a bit of context, I just want to show you, so this is currently the bike share stations that are within the City of Toronto. As staff said, they go out as far as Humber Bay. You can get off at the Exhibition GO train station and walk right to a bike share station. The furthest east it goes is Victoria Park. This is what we commonly refer to as the Orphan Bike Station. It's the only one east of Victoria Park in Toronto. Further bit of context, this is my ward. So my ward here is the blue area up here. I'm asking for a pilot project in southeastern Toronto. One of the frustrating things that residents in my area have expressed to me is the lack of a bike share program. They look at what's happening downtown Toronto, and there's nothing in eastern Toronto. This is my ward that's outlined here in blue. Some of the there's a package of letters, correspondence before you. This is University of Toronto. Centennial College has a campus here, has another campus here. This is the Toronto Pan Am Center here. Our major retail area, Morningside Crossing here. Heron Park Rec Center, Morningside Library. There were some comments about Metrolinx. This is the Rouge Hill GO train station. The Gilwood GO train station. There's another one further out here. There's an email from Metrolinx in your package that says they're very supportive of anything that's put forward by the City of Toronto, including a pilot project. So this is the area they major. All of these organizations from the Toronto Public Library, Metrolinx, University of Toronto Scarborough, Centennial Campus have all, East Scarborough Boys and Girls Club, Scarborough Storefront is the one community hub in our area. They've all put forward letters of support. They would like to see more cycling infrastructure in the city. One of the concerns that, or comments that I often hear is I've said, well, there isn't enough support. We have 3 cycling clubs, one in Ward 44 that's beside us as well, my ward, Ward 36. They said, well, for a feasibility study from the Toronto Parking Authority, they've never actually been consulted. University of Toronto, Centennial Campus are both very huge student areas. They actually run bike repair programs. They've said they would like to be some type of partner. They'd like to consider financial partnerships. Metrolinx, I'm sure all of you have seen, there's been reports lately, Metrolinx is looking at charging for parking, that they are trying to deal with a project that's called the last mile and reduce their parking. Residents in my area are saying, hey, if we can't park, we'd like to ride bikes. If we already have bike lots at, in particular, my ward, Gilwood GO train station, the bike lockers are full all the time. There's been repeated requests about why they don't have a bike share program in Scarborough. One of the other things we're doing in terms of public transit and trying to close the loop is the Eglinton East LRT, which is going to run from the Kennedy subway station, which is over here. It's going to run through here, Kingston Road, and up to UTSC. So having a bike share around that would be very useful and beneficial, and it would help include the infrastructure. Long and the short of it, I think there's a high demand for this. I want to continue to work with the Toronto Parking Authority, all the partners that I've listed in the motion, in the package of letters before you, because I think this is a very feasible project that can move this forward and to start closing the gap in Eastern Toronto. Thank you. The Scarborough subway ends somewhere over there. It would be.
Okay, so that is your pitch.
Questions of the speaker?
Oh.
Yes. I see that your Scarborough only includes anything south of 401. How about north of 401? Isn't Scarborough part of, also include north of 401?
It is. I'm the city councillor south of the 401, though, in the area here. If my goal, if this works, I would love to see it north of the 401.
Okay, I restarted a green loop up there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would just say that I think we should all be open to exploring different types of cycling options. And this one I find is unique. Haven't been on one of their bikes yet, but I think it's unique because it doesn't involve the clunky large docking stations. So, which we hear, I mean, I like bike share and I use it from time to time when I don't have my own bike. But it is cumbersome on our streets. It takes up a lot of real estate on the sidewalk, and with accessibility issues and mobility challenges, I think, you know, just to explore it, whether it works or whether it doesn't, we would be foolish not to explore this kind of concept. Thank you. Because we want bikes everywhere, including in the suburbs.
Anybody else? Councillor Layton?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm excited and quite surprised about the sudden enthusiasm for free-floating bike technology here from the committee. And I'm surprised because in September 2017, you received an item asking for a staff report, simply asking for a staff report where transportation staff would work with the TPA and the Energy and Environment Office to come back and talk about how we could better integrate this technology into our new system. I know you received the report because it was a letter from myself with making that recommendation after having met with Drop Bike about their technology, having seen them around the city. They aren't the only company in the space. I think it's important to recognize that there are other companies in the space, but the deputant was quite right that it's not necessarily their bikes that are the important part. It's the lock. The lock could actually potentially save us a lot of headaches with finding space to put these docking stations. I know there are complications and issues with how do we ensure that these bikes don't end up as clutter on our roads. I think that's something that will need to get evaluated. But the technology that didn't exist when we ordered the original bikes, it does now exist. I don't know if many of you know, when we started the system, you needed a little toggle, like a little keychain toggle to unlock the bikes. And then it was a card. And now it actually works by, I have an app that when I walk up to a station that has bikes, I push a button, it gives me a code, and I unlock the bike. And so they know it's me with the bike, and when I slide the bike in, it automatically, we're already kind of using this technology, but allowing us to eliminate the docks would be actually incredibly helpful. I represent a ward that is well serviced by Ward 19, and thank you very much to the taxpayers across the city, but in particular in Ward 7 for supporting that. Of course, I don't think anyone is listening to that rhetoric anymore, Councillor Mammoliti, but it's fine to keep saying it. But it is difficult to find space because we are all jockeying for space in the public right-of-way. There are patios that need space. There are regular bike locks. There are newspaper boxes. There are parkettes. It's difficult to find space for the docking stations. So I think a technology and a shift towards this technology would actually be very helpful. I did forward my motion from September 2017 to the clerk and CC'd the chair in hopes that someone would move it forward. But it looks like your chair is taking carriage of it through that motion. And I'm really happy for that because I think that this is a necessary step forward. The one other point I will say, though, is we can't end up with a situation where we have a bunch of private companies fighting for the space. That is very, very important. That is the lesson we learn from other places across, around the world, in fact, that cities that haven't said we want one operator have in fact found that they get so many operators that it ends up being a lot more clutter than is necessary, and everyone puts their bikes everywhere. Amsterdam, everyone owns an Amsterdam bicycle rental company. And there are so many bikes that have been put on their streets and on their bike locks. They're running out of space for people that actually live there and don't use a rental service. I think Seattle is the other example of when they were struggling, or I might be wrong, it's San Francisco. They were struggling with multiple operators. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind. And I certainly think, as I would, that the city should be the operator in that case because we also own the right-of-way.
Okay, any other speakers on this? Councillor Mammoliti. You have a motion, I think, don't you?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm switching it from the language that says Southeast Scarborough to all areas of Toronto. And the reason I'm doing that is because this has been an ongoing conversation for many years with the Toronto Parking Authority. And the same logic has been given to all of us. We can't have a pilot project in your area because we can't afford it. And so if we can't afford it in York West, how is it that we're going to afford it in Scarborough? I think a much larger plan needs to take place that includes the rest of the city that don't have the bike share program, and for that to come forward with some kind of a plan that satisfies the rest of the city. Councillor Layton left. He jabbed a little bit and then he left. But at the end of the day, I have to respond to the comment about me being excited about this because I'm not. I don't like the program. When I was on the Parking Authority, I voted against it because I didn't agree on subsidizing and running a program that doesn't work financially for the Parking Authority. Or for the city, for that matter. And I've always maintained that it should be a private sector initiative that works with the city, but at their expense. And we're starting to hear from other companies now, which is good news. Where Councillor Layton and others don't want us to do, is to look at the private sector for these kinds of models anymore. They just want the government to run the system and pay for it. So when he says one company, that company he's referring to is the City of Toronto. That's the only company that they're prepared to venture into some kind of agreement with. I think that if we were to look at expanding it and doing the complete opposite, that I think we can probably service the rest of the city with the private sector. And I'd love to hear back from staff on that and how to make that work. It's funny, Councillor Layton speaks in a negative tone with respect to Amsterdam and how they run their system. However, every time we have to hear about how wonderful a city that runs a bike system at all, they only speak of Amsterdam and how great Amsterdam is. So if Amsterdam is that great, how is it that you're finding flaw in the great city that they use as an example for bikes? I've been there. And there are more bikes than cars in Amsterdam, and the infrastructure, quite frankly, is needed. Councillor Ainsley wants me to wrap up. You know why it's a pet peeve, Councillor? I have to congratulate you, by the way, because I'm glad you did this. It's now opening up the eyes of the rest of us outside of the downtown core. And it's also suggesting that many people are going to start talking like me out there. As I've heard Councillor Lee speak today, he asked a question about north of 401. That's fantastic. I feel like I'm being echoed here.
All right. Wow. Nice to see. Okay, so I'm going to ask the clerks to put my motion up again. I just wanted people to be aware of what I was proposing. So it's really twofold. It's addressing Councillor Ainsley's motion and request to come back in the first quarter of 2019 and to layer onto that this exciting technology, which I've been hearing about more recently. And I would love to meet with the organization to talk to you in more detail. But to ask that the report includes options for implementing dockless bike sharing technology. I think that's important. It's less cumbersome on our city streets. And possibly they don't need to be subsidized, which would be really one of my dreams and objectives, I think, is to not, make this a cost implication and again, a burden for taxpayers. So we should be able to get this right, and maybe this is a way to move forward, and we have to embrace this technology. So this is my motion. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, I take to heart what Councillor Mammoliti mentioned about the ability to have the technology in other wards in the city. And I wondered if you would consider it a friendly amendment to change the word "in" before Toronto to say "across Toronto." So the last dockless bike sharing technology across Toronto.
Sure.
And it would be in the spirit that we're looking at doing this on a larger basis.
Sure. I mean, Councillor, we were at one point trying to merge our motions, but you wanted to move yours separately. So, but the intent is there.
Right.
You want to be very specific in your wording, so that's fine.
So what happens now to my motion if
It still stands, because you're amending the so
okay.
it's fine. But he's just really
Because I think the referral
layering
comes
on.
sequentially first. So.
Okay, so I have no issue with either of them. All those in favor, so we'll start with my motion. The one that's up here, all those in favor, that passes unanimously. Councillor Ainsley, stop trying to participate on this committee. I know you do, you're always here. We always look forward to we look forward to your additions. And we spent a whole hour on this. So that item is referred. Hallelujah. And then we have Councillor Mammoliti's motion.
Which is redundant now that your referral is approved.
Oh, okay. Referrals come through, okay. Sorry, there's nothing we can do.
You're becoming an expert at this.
No, that's what I was advised. Well, that's why Councillor Holiday actually helped you by amending this to across. He did.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. We'll be in touch. What? It's not my rules. Robert's rules are not my rules. They're it's council procedures, so we have to go back and change the procedures. Okay, let's actually start the agenda now and go back to the top, which is the first item is the PW 28.6 sewer system reduction. Is she here? Yes. Sewer system flood reduction measures in the Rockcliffe area. And that was held by Councillor Holiday, but I know that Councillor Nunziata has some questions or speak.
Can you just continue holding it down because I'm working on...
You're working on something? Okay. How long do you need? Because the next item is big. You're okay, time-wise? Okay, so we'll come back to that, and we're going to head back to PW 28.8. This is probably our biggest item today, State of the Toronto's Blue Bin Recycling Program. And we have one speaker on this. So if you could come forward, it's Chris McKillop from Club Coffee LP. Welcome, Chris. So you have 5 minutes.
Thanks very much. Just by way of introduction, I'm with Club Coffee, Toronto business since 1906. We've got more than 250 workers in Rexdale at skilled work, highly skilled work, actually, good pay, good benefits, and most of those are because of growing consumer demand for a compostable pod, which doesn't really play a key role in your immediate contamination question here. But why am I talking about it in the blue bin issue? Well, I want to go back to 2011 for a moment, when our coffee company first saw consumers wanted a solution to the concerns they had about the waste that they associate with single-serve coffee, and I know we'll come back to that in a moment. We looked at recyclable, and we rejected it at that time. Why? Because we know consumers, and this is critical in terms of the entire contamination issue. We know that in the case of single-serve, people choose it for variety, for quality, and above all, convenience. You pop it in the brewer, you add some water, you push a button, you've got a good cup of coffee. Convenience drives single serve, and this is going to be one of the fundamental issues that our friends in solid waste have to contend with in dealing with contamination. Convenience drives single serve, and we didn't see convenience in a recyclable option. We saw something that couldn't deliver in real life, deliver results in real life, and could potentially create other problems. I'd encourage you to take a couple of minutes if you want to see a particularly, frankly, funny video. Last August, Peter Kuttenbauer in the Financial Post on their website did one where he tried to take apart a recyclable pod. It was not very successful. Taking each part, taking it here, putting it there, putting it the other place, it's a great video, and it underlines the challenge that comes with new products hitting the market for the waste stream. So it's no wonder why back when we were looking at this, and this is 5 years ago now, our research predicted and our knowledge of consumer markets predicted the vast majority of consumers wouldn't do it. They wouldn't take it apart. Our research now confirms that they don't. And I believe that, in fact, solid waste staffs, as we saw in the reports, have come to the same conclusion from their evidence. We know from our own evidence that most single-serve drinkers who are in non-compostable formats, they just throw them in the garbage, which is consistent with what solid waste wants. The problem is, though, that means tons and tons of coffee are going into landfills, which is completely contrary to the city's waste policy goals. You want things like coffee in your organic stream, right? But the problem then for your blue bins, of course, is too many people are going to throw a whole pot in, coffee and all. You've got wet coffee grounds, and I think staff makes this point, contaminating the plastic and the paper that are in those streams. Now, consumer education, and we'll get to this in more detail in the next item on your agenda, is critical to these things. And there are some issues that you can communicate to improve what people do. But some just run into the harsh realities of human nature. You can't reverse engineer some things. You can't make an inconvenient solution work with a convenience-driven product. So when someone says, we can make this work, ask for the evidence. Ask for real data that shows that, yes, people are going to take an inconvenient thing and make it more inconvenient for them. From our point of view, and as I say, we'll talk about this later, compostable is a simple, convenient solution that works And that's why we're working with your solid waste staff to find ways to drive food waste, like coffee, the only place where it really belongs, where your policies say it belongs, which is the green bin. And that's why we believe that all single-serve coffee actually needs to shift to a certified compostable format that actually works in real life, actually works in the real world of the kinds of systems that the City of Toronto and other municipalities have as well. That will be the best way, one good way, to address some of the contamination concerns that staff have quite properly raised with you. Thank you. Yes, and I will say something completely different. Yes, exactly. Yeah, but I raised it simply because I know contamination, the whole single serve and the whole question of coffee getting in is one of the issues that's a constant irritation for them, or as they quite rightly tell us. My pleasure.
So I'm just in light of everything that's going on, Councillor Layton and I actually have a communication with this about plastics, and I know Councillor Robinson is working on the black plastics and materials as well. So just with regards to other municipalities, where are we at? Like, are we behind? Are we ahead? Are we, what more can we be doing in your...
Through you, Madam Chair, I would say we're ahead. We have probably one of the most sophisticated recycling systems in North America right now. We accept some materials that other municipalities do not. That is partly because of economies of scale. We produce enough material that it actually allows us to do that. We are, in terms of some of the issues that are outlined in the report, we are in better shape than a lot of municipalities. We made some investments and some contract changes last year that went through committee and council in kind of preparation for some of these issues that has put us in a better standing than where some of our neighbors are right now that are currently bringing forward even uglier reports than this one is in terms of financial impact. But there is a lot more that we are doing to try and mitigate these impacts, and there will likely be more that we will have to do over the coming months to further mitigate some of these impacts.
And can you remind me again, so what is our policy on bottled water? Because I thought it was, we are not allowed to sell bottled water in any city facility. Am I wrong on that, or?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that's my understanding. That's not a solid waste responsibility, but yes, that's my understanding.
That's a policy of the city. And so what about, I've seen in rec centers, you know, we have a contract with, I think, Pepsi, and we have bottled water for sale in those vending machines. I'm not sure, are you aware of that?
That's, again, Madam Chair, that'd be a question for the GM of PFNR.
Okay.
Also, our acting DCM could address this.
Okay.
Through you, Madam Chair, my understanding of the policy was that we would not sell it in city facilities, but we would continue to acknowledge that we had existing contracts with vending companies and our suppliers, and we would continue on with those arrangements. It wasn't a termination of any existing arrangement. It was just on a go-forward basis.
Okay. And can you talk about the contamination, which is always a pet peeve of mine, and as I have griped endlessly, I even see creamers in the green bins here on the second floor. I'd like to hide in a balaclava and hunt those culprits down. But I mean, if we can't even figure out how to divert our waste and recycle properly, how do we expect the regular Torontonians to do that? So can you talk about the effects of not, you know, why it is important that we separate our waste properly, the cost to not separating it, and what we're doing for education?
Okay, that's a big question through you, Madam Chair. To start with, through education, we do a lot of education, a lot of promotion, advertising, and I would say we are absolutely the leaders in getting the message out, and innovation and education, multiple languages. I think it's 18 or 19 different languages that we translate all our material into to try and target different new populations coming into the city. We are, over the last year or so, have started moving forward with more aggressive enforcement of our programs as well. In some cases, single-family curbside, where we're actually sending people door to door, looking at bins, identifying what's wrong in those bins, leaving notices behind. We'll go back out a second time. If we see that bin still has contamination in it, we'll push that bin back and refuse to collect it. We started that as a pilot late in the fall, saw some pretty good success, so we're going to go much larger scale starting in the next couple of weeks now that the weather's a bit better, and move forward with that. So it's more, you know, we do everything sort of mass communication. Now we're moving more to at the door or at the building, or working in the multi-residential context with the building owners, the property managers, trying to get that message directly to residents, directly to tenants, that this is a huge financial impact, and it's one that's entirely within the control of the city to manage, because it's all about behavior.
What's the price tag that we're quoting per year for the cost of contamination? Do we have?
Well, the numbers that we use is we're sitting around 25 to 30% of all the recycling we collect right now is contamination. For every percentage point we can reduce that, we save the city between $600,000 and $1 million.
Okay. I would love that job, enforcement. So let's.
We'll chat.
2019, look for me at your doorstep. So just to end on a positive note, can you tell? Can you, thank you, Councillor Fruitza, for that valid, important comment. Can you, we'll end on a positive note, can you talk to us about the circular economy and what we're doing for that?
Sure. So a lot of this ties into a circular economy, and so we're actively involved with producers of this product and trying to work through what we call extended producer responsibility, where the companies that are responsible for putting the products and the packaging into the market in the first place are ultimately also responsible for the management of that product or packaging at the end of its life. And when I say responsible, not only the programs and services, but also the cost of doing so, and putting the cost onto the people who are actually putting the packaging into the market in the first place. And that's really what a circular economy about is connecting all those dots right through the life cycle of a product or a package. And so we're actively involved through the group that we've set up internal to the Solid Waste Division, working with producers in the industry, working with neighboring municipalities right across the province and the country, trying to develop these programs and services to push a circular economy forward.
And are we working with groups that are like in a lending library kind of way, like the tool library and things like that?
Through you, Madam Chair, absolutely. Any types of lending libraries, tool shares, nonprofit organizations. We're working on a big textile strategy right now that engages groups like Canadian Diabetes Association, all these types of community groups that are out there that in some cases are already providing these services. We don't necessarily need to take the service on. We can just enable them to do even more.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just a fast question. First of all, thank you very much for what you did on Western Road for me.
You're welcome. Looks good.
Looks a lot cleaner.
Yeah.
But some of these apartments, like some of the, not even necessarily high-rise, but where there's they have, and even some of the old condominium buildings, they have their own private collection, right? And so how are we, because they have private collection, how are we enforcing the bylaws?
Through you, Madam Chair, the short answer is we're not, because we don't actually have, if they're using private collection, we don't actually have any degree of control over the actual collection and what happens to that material. That is something as Solid Waste we're working on right now, and we'll bring that forward through the committee and council process. Is there a way to build into the bylaw to actually require, regardless of who's providing the service, that they offer the three-stream service to their residents?
So you're working on a bylaw then? Okay, well, that's good then.
We are. Yeah.
So sometimes in these areas, I'll give you an example of my area, okay, where there's retail, and tenants on top, where you see that they're throwing out all the garbage and recycling, all that together in one bin. You can, so in that case, like, what do we do? Do we go through the bins and how do we charge them?
So right now, that's
Because
what
you
we're...
know that they're not recycling, they're just throwing everything all in one bin.
Right. So we work, both our own staff and in partnership with municipal licensing and standards to enforce the bylaws that we do have. In some cases now, as I mentioned, we are sending basically inspectors out to start inspecting these bins, identifying. We've really focused in on the recycling bins right now because that's the big issue of the day, to get that material cleaner. But literally going door to door, lifting those bins and seeing what's in there and leaving notices that it has to be cleaned up.
So you have to actually go through the bins, like,
We do, yeah.
yeah, okay, thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. There's a bunch of numbers on contamination levels in here, so I wanted to try to get them straight. The percentage of bins with contaminated recyclables.
That's a different number depending on single family and multifamily. We work more on the quantity of material, so
let's use the quantity. So the percentage of material within the blue bin that is contaminant.
We're in the neighborhood of 25 to 30% right now. 25
to 30%. What's the most common contaminant in the bins?
Oh, that's a good question. It's a combination of materials that are labeled as recyclable that aren't. We see a lot of food waste, organic waste in there, and textiles is becoming a big problem in the recycling bins.
What's labeled as recyclable and not? What do you mean? Like what type of thing is labeled as? I know that the little Mobius loop thing doesn't mean it's recyclable. A lot of people think it does.
Right. And this is where it becomes a bit of semantics. That little label actually does mean that it's recyclable, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's recyclable in a municipal program. And that becomes the challenge. So black plastic trays is the best example. It looks like recycling. It feels like recycling. It's labeled as recycling. We can't accept it as recycling in our program.
And
that's the sort of stuff
how much black plastic is in our recycling?
You know, we don't have a specific number on black plastic. We do, it's coming.
Wonderful. Then I'll ask if you could also answer the question about how much black plastic is in the overall waste stream. That would be helpful too. The cost of contamination, there's a number listed and hid here, but could you refresh my memory?
So the cost of contamination right now, based on where we're now up in the 25 to 30% range, we're estimating a spike. That's what the forecast is for 18 of around 9.2 million. That's comprised of two numbers. One is an additional 4 million in processing cost, because the more garbage there is in there, the more it costs to process it out.
Yep.
And the more garbage that is in the recycling, the more damage it does to the actual good recycling that's in there. And when our good recycling gets damaged, it's worth less to sell it into the marketplace.
So black plastics aren't recyclable, but plastics of the same material, any other color, recyclable.
That's correct.
Coffee lids, black coffee lids?
No.
Not recyclable.
That's correct.
Coffee lids of any other color?
Yes.
So a little blue, I guess it wouldn't be blue dye, because that would just make it more black. But a little bit of a color change, and all of a sudden goes from non-recyclable, costing us $9.2 million a year, to recyclable.
In simple terms, yes.
In simple terms. Straws, anything we can do about straws? They're not black, they're not recyclable.
No.
No? Is it the type of plastic?
It is.
Do we have the number from the black plastic yet, or we're working on it? So let me ask you. I actually brought my lunch, and it's leftover banjaras from a great Indian place at Bloor and Crawford. You should go. They had a recent fire. They'll be open again soon. The neighbor had a recent fire. So I get takeout on occasion, yes, but I reuse them. Your measure of how much of a neighbor you are in my neighborhood is how many Banjara's containers there you have at home, because you reuse them. So they recently switched from a black bottom and a clear top to a white bottom and a clear top. So that means that this is recyclable entirely, whereas the other one was not.
That's correct.
Wow, it's a pretty simple change to make. Do we have that number about how much?
63 total tons in the waste stream of black plastic.
63 tons. And how much is contaminant?
Well, if it's in the blue bin, it's all contaminant.
So, but we don't know how much of what's in the blue bin as contaminant is black plastic?
Yeah,
that's okay.
We just have the total number.
You can say no.
But I can tell you a lot of it ends up in the recycling, because everyone thinks that it is.
Everyone thinks it's recycled. I did until like a year ago. And where I then went and told bin jars that I would appreciate a change in the color of plastic.
And we appreciate you doing that.
They did. Thank you.
Oh, that's what I mean, questions. But no, Councillor Carmichael Grubb had questions. She was up before you.
I just have one quick question. So recycling bins, the largest size is extra large, correct?
That's correct.
And how many is a single family household allowed to have?
As many as they want, through you, Madam Chair.
So they can have 2 or 3 or, have you with the rebate on garbage bins becoming smaller, have you noticed higher amounts of contamination in recycling bins? Is there any sort of correlation?
Through you, Madam Chair, I have the suspicion, and that's what it is right now, that as garbage becomes more expensive, garbage will end up in recycling. We are actually going out there collecting empirical data to see whether that is a true statement or not.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Holiday, you're next, and then Councillor Mamalady.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The information in this report really worries me, and I was thinking about this as I was washing out a jam jar a couple of days ago before I put it in the recycling bin, but I wonder if staff could elaborate just how damaging, a half jar of mayonnaise is if it's thrown into the blue bin, and what the implication is, how much of a load can be rejected, where does it go, that type of stuff.
So to give you an example on the quality specifications that now exist, largely due to the change in China, a piece of paper with a coffee stain on it is now garbage. Previously, that would have still been able to be recycled. So a half jar of mayonnaise into a blue bin on the street can ruin the entire contents of that blue bin. If it gets mixed around enough, it could theoretically ruin the entire contents of the truck.
So what happens when the truck comes and tips its load and there's squished mayonnaise and some half-eaten pizza wedged in a box? What do you do at the sorting center, and how much material is rejected and where does it go?
So we've implemented a number of inspection points now. The first one is at the transfer station. So if a recycling truck comes in with a heavily contaminated load, we can move some of that material around even with the loader on the floor at the transfer station. The next step is it goes to the recycling facility, and there's a series of checkpoints all the way through the processing facility, either manual or mechanical, that will remove different types of contamination. The pizza box with the cheese still squished on it will be removed now as contamination. Any fiber that has organic material on it gets removed. All those sorts of things at various checkpoints in the system get removed. The problem is that every checkpoint in the system has a cost associated with it. So it becomes a very expensive way of managing garbage.
So where does the product that's contaminated go? Is it landfill?
It goes to our landfill site, yes.
So even a coffee-stained piece of paper or a coffee-stained book suddenly becomes landfill when the answer was the organic should never have ended up in the blue bin.
That's correct.
So, we put plenty of stuff in, we do our best to wash it, and I get it, it's hard to rinse out containers. Do you feel that there is an adequate level of education to the public about the damage that dirty cans and bottles and stained paper does to the recycling stream, and ultimately the cost?
I think, through you, Madam Chair, I think there's always an opportunity to do more education to get that message out. I think one of the things that we haven't done, enforcement is also a good educational tool to make them fully aware of what the costs are of these types of issues, rather than just telling them what they are so that they actually see it in their pocketbook. We haven't gone there yet. We are seeing some good results with rejecting bins, moving some materials around, that sort of thing. But I think ultimately, to really get the message out to residents, that is a tactic we may have to go to at some point.
The report alludes to our contract with Canada Fibers, and I guess there's a threshold. And if we cross that, there's costs, $4 million in processing fees. Would it be fair to say that if we continue down the path of increased contamination, this will have a material impact on the ratepayer with respect to the cost that we all have to pay towards our bins? So never mind raising the price of garbage and the tipping fees, but the triggers from these extra expenses will be in the millions of dollars, and that will ultimately translate back to what we pay.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, and we actually put that specifically in the report. A $9 million forecasted impact is the equivalent of a 3% rate increase on the solid waste rate.
3%.
Obviously, we'll do everything we can to mitigate that, but that's what the numbers work out.
And that has nothing to do with a change on the solid waste side. That's just dealing with costs out of the recycling stream.
That's just to deal with that one issue.
And is it fair to say that I guess the end product is bundled and baled, that potentially when it surpasses the 0.5% of contamination to who's buying it, I guess, is overseas, that whole bundle could get thrown into the landfill?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that is the concern, is that those entire bundles, the bales, the sea containers, if they, the way it's working the inspections in China right now, if they open up the back doors on a sea container and they even smell something like garbage, they will shut those doors, reject the entire sea container, and then it gets shipped somewhere. It can be shipped back, it can be shipped to another market. India is taking some of that material right now, but that's how strict they've gotten at the Chinese border.
So I'm out of time, but can I suggest a top 10 hit list on really bad things somehow get circulated out there if it isn't already out there? Because I think people need to know how bad that is.
Absolutely, we can certainly provide that.
Thanks.
Councillor Mamalidi.
So this report is looking for more money from households?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, it's not. It's just daylighting the fact that if we don't get this situation under control, it will cost more money. And the best way to get this situation under control is for the households to do a better job in their participation.
So what are the households supposed to do? Are they supposed to do an extra set of dishes on all their dirty jars? Is that what we're expecting them to do?
We're asking them
to throw them all into the sink along with their dishes before they throw them out?
If I wouldn't suggest they have to go to that rigor, but certainly a quick rinse before they throw it out would be helpful. What we're asking the residents to do is to really think twice before you throw something in the blue bin and make sure that it actually is recyclable.
So let's talk about that for a second. A resident that notices some mayonnaise on a newspaper they just read decides that it doesn't belong in the recycling, it belongs in the garbage. And then your folks come out and reject the garbage because they notice a newspaper in it. What are they supposed to do with that?
Through you, Madam Chair, we won't be rejecting the garbage if we see contaminated newspaper. That's where it belongs.
So your folks have not rejected any garbage because there's been newspaper in it. Is that what you're saying?
That's what we're saying right now, is our focus is entirely on cleaning up the recycling stream.
Well, I have residents that have complained that you don't pick up the garbage bins because there are newspapers in it.
Well, that's news to me, Madam Chair, but if you have those buildings or locations, we'd be quite happy to look into that to figure out why that happened. Obviously, we want people to recycle, that we don't want to stop people from recycling. And we try to encourage people to do the best job recycling as possible. But given the issues with the program, that's our focus.
How many people stick to, do we know the statistics? How many people actually do everything to the book? Do we know the number? How many of them actually do everything that we expect them to do with their recycling and their garbage and their organics?
Based on the inspections that we've seen, it depends. Single-family households seem to be better at recycling than the multi-residential households,
although there are differences. What's the percentage of people that are doing it perfectly?
Doing it perfectly? I would say very few people are doing it perfectly.
So that would indicate...
Good enough for our purposes, I would say probably 75% of the people are doing a good job.
A good job, or the way we'd want it?
Good enough for our purposes right now.
It's still costing us money.
It's still recycling costs us money regardless. Even if we were a perfectly clean system, it's still going to cost us money.
This is going to sound really stupid to a lot of people, and I really don't care. But I have to ask the question.
No, it's in style. It's okay.
Why don't we just sort? Isn't it cheaper if we just sort it all out and we go back to residents just throwing it into a bin so that we could do it as a city and recycle on our own and sort it out and bring it to where it's supposed to go? Isn't it cheaper to do it that way than what we're currently expecting? And the chances of us having to go back and charge more is probably inevitable, I would imagine.
Through you, Madam Chair, we're actually working on a project like that right now, that if we asked residents just to throw it all in one bin, what sort of technology may exist out there that would sort it out on their behalf? What are the costs associated with that technology? What's the quality of the material that comes out of the back?
It's not that stupid of a question.
No, it's absolutely a fair question, and there's a lot of large urban municipalities that are struggling with this issue, asking the exact same question.
All right. So then my next question is, if we do that, can't we have a report that talks about the savings that comes with that system?
Through you, Madam Chair, once we get the work done, we will bring a report forward on that and the cost, because the next step would be a business case to actually build a piece of infrastructure. We'll bring that forward as soon as it's ready to go. As a warning, though, it's likely more expensive than the system we have today. We're just confirming that.
Well, I've heard of other systems around the world that might be cheaper, but I'm looking forward to hearing that. But it sounds like we're heading down that as a potential option.
We are.
And that would make it easier for the households, wouldn't it? If we, because you have to have a degree now to understand how to throw garbage, right?
Well, and to be fair, that's our concern as well, is that there's so much confusion out there right now. Are we asking too much of residents in terms of participating in the programs now? And is there other ways to be able to achieve the same objective?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perruzza. Your mic's not on, Councillor Perruzza.
Here, I'll put it on.
You can't hear me?
Oh, somebody knew that it's his seat, so they.
Oh, it's been muted.
Which is great.
Maybe if you could just speak a little louder.
I'll do my best. How does somebody know that a little bit of coffee on a sheet of paper is no longer a recyclable sheet of paper? I didn't know that till you just said it. And I wouldn't know where to go to find that information out.
Through you, Madam Chair, so there's stuff that we send out, our annual collection calendars that we send out to every resident in the city.
I follow that. It says that on there? A drop of coffee on a sheet of paper no longer recyclable?
That is a recent development as much as a month ago with the way, and that's part of the challenge is that we're living in an environment right now where the markets are changing on literally a daily basis as to what is going to be acceptable.
And I often, like, I sort of aluminum with some, you know, it's kind of like residual food. You got to scrape that off to put it into the recycling bin, right? Like, it's how do people find that stuff out? How do they get to know that? I think that most people would want to be helpful to you, and I think that most people would like to, in good conscience, do it the right way. It's just a question of people don't know. And we have no capacity or ability to let them know, or in a simple way.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I tend to agree with you that most people want to do the right thing. It's trying to get the message out, and that's why we use online tools. We do direct mail-out tools. We have, in multi-residential buildings, we've got kiosks with all different types of information in multiple different types of languages. We're doing everything that we can to get the message out on what the right thing is to do. But there is a segment of the population that doesn't care as well, and they are a real problem in the system right now.
But have you ever thought about, you know, like at least initially, some upfront monies on a real campaign, you know, like radio ads, television ads, things like that, so that while it might cost you some money up front, like all the things you mentioned, I can tell you from the kind of ward that I represent, online tools, multi-language kiosk information bulletins, you know, the other things you did. That's just you know how much of it that permeates the real people out there. Just almost zero, right? So you're spending all this money with no real sort of impact to it, right?
So through you, Madam Chair, all those things that you mentioned, we're also doing all of those. We have radio ads, we have television ads, we have ads in the subway stations. We try to target where a lot of people are. We've done it before the movie starts in movie theaters. You'll see an ad from solid waste. We've tried just about every type of advertising and communication we can imagine.
So is it me that doesn't watch any television? Because I haven't seen any of your ads.
Well, if you
I didn't even know you
watch
had
television, read the paper, listen to the radio, or go on social media, you'll see it eventually. It is there. It is there.
Yeah, well, okay.
Start watching TV.
Yeah, I should turn on the TV, exactly. Yeah, all right.
Okay, are you finished? Clear. Okay, I've got about 1,000 questions, but I only have a bit of time, so I have to rein that in. So basically, if I kind of drill down, the three most challenging factors here are contamination, the international market conditions, and then the full extended producer responsibility model that the province has not really come through on. I mean, they've been working on it. We've been collaborating with them, but what's the delay on that? Is it another year, or how much time do they need?
We anticipate to get a plan in place. It will be at least another year to get the plan in place, and then transition will take upwards of anywhere from 5 to 10 years.
But that's a really critical piece of this puzzle, isn't it? That producer responsibility, and really that's in the province's hands.
It puts the accountability for management of all these problematic materials on the ones who actually have control over them.
Right. Okay, so really that's a good synopsis. I guess the circular economy, you and I have had many conversations about that. We've had conversations with the Minister of Environment about that. You and your staff and I have gone up and met with, the former minister, Glenn Murray, and had great conversations about that. But it just doesn't seem to be, it just seems to be in slow motion. Would you agree? It's just not, it's not making its way through the provincial bureaucracy.
Moving faster would be good, absolutely.
Okay, better for Toronto.
Yes.
And so the price tag of all this is $9.2 million, potentially?
That was the forecast a month ago, yes.
A month ago, that was the forecast. And that could really, that could end up being then a major hit on the taxpayer, and to what tune?
Through you, Madam, or to you, Madam Chair, yet to the ratepayer, and we're forecasting a $9 million hit as a 3% increase to the rate.
Okay, so that's very significant. I don't think that would be very popular. How do we mitigate that? How do we mitigate our residents, help mitigate this situation so residents don't end up holding the bag on this?
So we're moving forward with additional education, promotion, advertising campaigns to get the message out. We're going to be moving forward with a more aggressive stance on enforcement, doing bins inspections, rejecting bins at the curbside. And then part of what is included in this report and the recommendations is some delegated authority to allow me, one, the ability to respond quickly as the market is changing quickly, but also two, to redirect some materials to different types of facilities that exist to see if in a different facility we have a better way to manage some of the problematic materials that we have today and start testing some of those technologies.
Okay, so you and I have worked on 3 motions that I have actually pre-circulated to my committee members. These motions you support fully?
Absolutely.
So you support these motions fully. Have you vetted these through legal? Has legal reviewed this?
The legal department was consulted on the motion with the 3 parts, is that what you're referring to?
That's what I'm referring to? Okay, which has been pre-circulated to committee. So legal has seen this, you fully support this. Do you think these motions, for people who maybe aren't focused on the environment so much and maybe focused more on fiscal responsibility, do these motions help you potentially reduce the costs that maybe affect our residents in the city?
Yes, Madam Chair, they do.
The long-term plan would, these
motions will contribute to both an improvement in environmental performance and financial performance of the system.
So really, at the end of the day, these are positive all round.
All round.
All round, from an environmental perspective, but also financial impact. Okay, and then just on I guess the waste wizard, is there any way to make that clearer? So for instance, if you look at putting waste in its place, and it's a terrific initiative and program, but is there any way to really make it much clearer so it's easier to navigate for residents? For instance, above the green bin, it says, take food items out of plastic bags, wraps. Do not use biodegradable bags. That could be misinterpreted as that you can't put your organics in a grocery bag and put it in the green bin. Is there any way to kind of tackle this, use this calendar that you've got, which is an amazing communication piece, just to kind of make it more, to simplify and make it the language clearer so it's easier for residents to navigate?
That's what we're trying to achieve, yeah, is to make it as simple to understand as possible.
Okay. I mean, I think it's a fantastic, it's fantastic. I just think it could be even clearer. Because as we've heard today, people are struggling with what goes in their green bin, what goes in blue bin, and what goes in garbage. So that's really helpful to hear that you're going to tackle that. Okay, that's, I think, the last question. My time's up. And so we're going to move to speakers now, and I just want to again advise committee that I have pre-circulated 3 motions that I'm going to be moving today. I hope you'll support them. But is there any speakers? We've lost Councillor McMahon. Councillor Layton would like to speak. Councillor Layton, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Councillor McMahon and I submitted a motion, I think it was 2 months ago now, that requested that city staff undertake a review of some of these contaminant items that are ending up in our recycling stream and how we might do a municipally led extender producer responsibility model, where the municipality would start to say, you know what, this isn't working for us. Because as municipalities, we need to lead because we are the ones most impacted. The province is going to need to be dragged along on this. And in an effort to push forward that process, and I'll highlight that there is precedent for this with the cosmetic pesticide ban, that when municipalities lead, provinces follow. And so we have an opportunity here to use this report and these changes to the international marketplace to call out producers of material that is not working within our stream, either the black plastics or composite material that can't be separated out. That we didn't talk about today, but when a piece of paper has a piece of plastic embedded on it, it's the same thing. It doesn't end up in the recycling stream because we can't process it and put it, readily separate those things easily. So we need to send an indication to industry that they need to make it easier for us to deal with their things. Yes, and I know I'll get called out on Twitter, we need to start with the first R. We need to reduce the amount of packaging first, but we're still going to end up with stuff at the end, and we need to focus on that third R and make these products easier for us to deal with within our waste stream. Councillor McMahon and I submitted a motion through a letter to a communication initiating that dialogue, not calling to ban this and ban that, but say give it back to staff. Staff actually wrote the most of the recommendation. Give it back to staff and let them evaluate some of the worst offenders in our system: the black plastics, the single-use cutlery, the plastic straws, the coffee lids. Because as we heard, it's that simple. It's the exact same container that it was before, except this isn't black, and all of a sudden, it's recyclable. When you go to Canada's most famous coffee chain and you get a lid there, it's not recyclable. But you go down the street to the Independent, and if they use a white lid, a purple lid, a blue lid, an orange lid, all of those are recyclable. It's not that big of a change for these producers. They just need to be given a very clear indication of what we need from them. And we need them to stop using things that don't work in our waste stream. Again, under the preface that we start with the first R, we should be reducing our single-use everything. But 2 steps later, with whatever's left, needs to work in our system because it's costing us money. So I would beg, if it's not, I haven't seen the chair's motions, but if it's not in there, very specifically to look at municipal bans on certain types of products that aren't recyclable in our system, I would beg any member of the committee to just pick the language out of that staff wrote for Councillor McMahon and I, plug it into a motion and put it on the floor. If not, I'm going to a council. Thank you.
And if you could put the motions on the screen. I've worked closely with, very closely with staff on this, and as you've heard, they've run it by legal. This is a big problem that we are facing at a city, a very significant problem, and there's a number of challenges related to contamination, as you've heard, the international market conditions, that are really fluctuating, and then the full extended producer responsibility model that we've talked about for years as part of our waste management services. So I won't go into great detail except to say that this is to the tune of $9 million decrease in revenues. That is significant and terrifying, and it would represent a 3% increase to our rates for garbage and waste. So it's something that this committee has to take very seriously, and that's why I'm putting forward these motions, because contamination has been increasing since 2013. Black plastics are a big problem, and we need to find a way to tackle them. So this achieves that, hopefully, as a process, putting a process in place. As well, tackling the green bin pieces and looking at products and packaging and how much you can recycle them and compost them, and then also looking at one of my banes of my existence is all the clothing. There's all this clothing. My garage is full of clothing that you can't really repurpose. So what do we do with all that textile material? Again, we've heard stories in the media on both those issues, the garbage, the recycling, as well as textiles. It's been all over the media. So this is a big problem. We need to tackle it as a committee, and these motions will hopefully help us do this, because at the end of the day, it's about the environment, but equally it's about our financial impact on the residents. And I don't think the residents should end up holding the bag. I think staff are doing a good job, as you've heard, going out and doing enforcement and doing education, but I think we need to increase that dramatically and up that. And this is a very complex issue and very important issue to our city. So I hope everybody's going to support these, because these are, I think, strong motions that will help us get where we need to go over the long term. Is there any questions? Council, or you want to speak?
Actually,
okay, go ahead.
Perhaps. I'd asked a question earlier about a report that talks about a different model. Is that going to be included in this motion? Can it be?
No, I think it would be better if you did it
separately.
separately.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's better if it's separate, because it would actually stand, because this isn't a referral.
So then I'd ask staff to help me with the language there, so that everybody's happy with it. I would like to see a model that incorporates the ability for residents to throw everything in and for us to be doing the separating, and how that might work around the world, and the costs associated to that.
So are you moving that right now? You're speaking?
I'd like to.
You're speaking?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I started out in my questions. I know you want to see the language, but really that'll be the language in it. It'll be a report that talks about those options. And maybe I should wait for staff to. You put my.
Speak on this. Do you need him to write something, or? Okay. All right. So, I mean, that's a big stray from where we are, right? Because we've already invested in green bins I guess that's my question to you. We already have the infrastructure in place.
I get it, but we're about to venture into other reports that are going to suggest that our homeowners start paying more money. I know that that's going to happen. So with that, there should be other options at our,
So my motions are in an attempt to mitigate that and so that doesn't happen.
for now.
Yeah, it's an interim, but at least it's a step in the right direction.
Wouldn't you want to know there are other options, Madam Speaker?
So you can,
Madam Chair?
I'm happy for you to move your motion separately, but I think the clerks need a little help on what your intent is.
Well, my intent is to give us other options that might be available to us in the future that include.
So, Councillor Mamalady, there's a suggestion, as you know, we have a long-term waste management strategy.
Yes.
And.
Which isn't working clearly, but yes.
But we have this body approved our long-term waste management strategy. And so it's being suggested to build it into that, to
build what into it? What
You're
I'm
saying it is
suggesting?
in there.
It is in there?
You could maybe move a motion to further reinforce it.
We may want a separate report to highlight that comes forward. Maybe that's something, maybe that's how to do this, so that we understand it better.
So, and I'm also being advised that it would take 1.5 to 2 years to finish that report because it's a big undertaking. But it is, so just to give you a bit of comfort, it is in the long-term waste management strategy. If you want to move a motion to highlight that or enhance that or fast track it, but they're saying it would take 1.5 minimum to
I'm not sure if you heard the news or not, but I'm staying here. I'm not going anywhere, so I'll wait.
I have heard that, yes.
So,
Are you going to stay on PWIC?
I'll wait. I don't know. Do you want me?
I'm not going to, no comment. No comment.
She might want to move on. If you're going to be here, she might move on.
Councillor Nunziata's moving a motion.
So that wouldn't be the first time. So it's just clear, just to report back. Is that okay on that?
Well, it's when they have the information.
Okay.
It was part and parcel of the report, but if you want to
The reason I
highlight
want
it
it as
today,
a
I
motion
think.
is I just want it on the record that this could be an option to us and we should learn more about it, really.
Okay, but just don't expect anything for 1.5 years.
All right, so I'll have
Correct?
a couple more gray
That's the
hairs.
minimum amount of time it would take to,
I'll have a couple more gray hairs. I'm good. It's okay.
oh, okay. So would you like me then to give clerks those concepts to?
Please.
That language? All right, why don't we go to other speakers and then come back to you?
Okay,
Do you want to do
let's do
that?
that,
And then you'll
yeah.
have your motion ready? Is there, Councillor Carmichael Greb, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a motion to request the General Manager, Transportation Services to report prior to the next rate-supported budget on whether there is a correlation between the increase in the number of recycling bins residents are using, the level of contamination in the recycling stream, and the increasing cost or lowering of the rebate of garbage bins. This is just something I have been curious about for the last couple of years, but have never really had a clear answer on. So I would imagine that there might be a correlation between the two, but just so that we can get some numbers back and see if there actually is.
I would have one question for you, Councillor Carmichael Greb. Would you like to put a timeline on that, just because otherwise it might go
prior
into
to the next rate-supported budget.
Oh, you have that? Did you write that in there?
It is.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't even see it. So that would mean the fourth quarter, like
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed that. Go ahead.
I just wonder if it's the general manager of solid waste.
Yes, that would be helpful.
There were some concerned
think
looks
that-
from down the table.
No, let's just do it for fun. Transportation has nothing to do. They're so bored, they're twiddling their thumbs. Like, this would be a good little exercise for them to undertake. Good catch, Councillor Holiday. Way to go. Were they going white? Was the blood running out of their faces? Okay. All right. So that's my only question. So you would like it fairly quickly? Okay. Great. Any other remarks before we move back to Councillor Mamalady? Okay, Councillor Perruzza.
Yeah, just very simply, I think we need to do a better job of letting people know how they should be separating their waste, because it's just I don't think we get the information. I mean, I was sitting here and I watch television from time to time, albeit mostly the occasional movie or some sport event. I watched the replay of the Roma game last night, and then I watched TFC late into the evening, and I was really happy about all the teams wearing red yesterday, and they all won. But other than that, I mean, you get, other than that, yeah, you know, I get very, very little information, and other than that calendar that I have sort of posted on the inside of my garage, where, you know, that sort of keeps me on track in terms of, you know, when it's garbage day, when it's like recycling day, and when it's like yard waste and things like that. But in terms of what to put where and how to do that, it's you know, it's kind of like pay as you go. It's like hit and miss, and I think we need to do we need to do you know, a better job of that. Maybe something on the recycling bit. I don't know what that answer is. I'm not making any, you know, overt suggestions. But if you're not reaching me, and I read, I ride the TTC from time to time, I check my social media, occasionally I'll float around on the internet, you know, read my emails, reply to them and things like that, and I'm not getting it. So if I'm not getting it, I don't know how many other people out there are. So I just, that's it.
Okay, thank you. And then Councillor Mamalady, I think the motion is ready.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, and I hope you guys can support this, because I think we're going to be talking about this one day, when we recognize that the current system that we do have, and we're already starting to hear it's not working, and it's almost impossible to educate everyone the way we would want to be educated, and we're learning that now. And we're also learning that we've made some mistakes in terms of fee increases to garbage pickup, because while we don't want to admit it yet, we know that what's happening out there are people are just throwing things into recycling, and if they can't get away with doing that stuff that don't belong there, they will dump at the side of the road somewhere. And I can show you 2 places in my own ward that have become dump sites. One is Torbury Road, and I hope staff are taking note of this particular instance, because the minute someone picks up the garbage, which turns into a mound that a dump truck has to take out once a week, that's from everyone in the area, in my opinion, that doesn't have room in their garbage bins or the recycling bins, and are throwing it on the sides of the road. And that's happening more and more. And Councillor Nunziata gave me an example of her own ward, where in bus shelters, people are throwing their garbage right beside the garbage bins because they're getting away with it, and they can't get away with doing what they want to do curbside without being charged as well. And so for me, I think we need a new system. I don't believe that this system is working. I know it's long-term, but I think eventually we're all going to be talking about whether or not the city can actually service the taxpayer the way they deserve to be, and that's the city doing it, and not the taxpayer. And quite frankly, the taxpayer is getting really fed up with having to pay the fees continually every budget associated to garbage. So when I hear staff saying it's going to be more expensive to do it in the method that has our own staff separating the garbage and dealing with it, I think I can live with that more than what we're doing right now, and that's continually hitting the taxpayer for garbage pickup. And we're using all kinds of reason and logic for that, which doesn't make any sense, and I vote against that every year. I'd like to see us change that to a different model, but I'll wait until we spend hundreds of millions and perhaps billions of dollars on a system that I think doesn't work. I think eventually staff are going to come to realize that, and they're going to want to change it. So this allows us at least an ability to look at that when the time comes. So the system, in my opinion, doesn't work. The fees aren't working. It's only proving to us that vote against it every year that the opposite is happening at curbside. And I've got examples of that. And if staff want to go right now, go to Torbury right now and look at the wonderful dump site right beside the new subdivision that's there. That's not the subdivision doling out their garbage and putting it there. That's the whole community in a very isolated spot getting away with throwing their garbage. And you know why they're throwing it there? Because it doesn't fit in their bin and they don't want to pay the extra costs associated to bins. That's what's going on. I think it's happening more. I think Councillor Nunziata gave us an example. I think all of us have those examples So let's deal with this once and for all and get the city to do what they have to do, and that's even recycle for the people if that's what it comes down to.
Councillor Mamalady, you have one question. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I wondered if the councillor could explain or elaborate on the word in-house, because I had always remembered that as the opposite of outsourced.
I think in terms of my definition, in-house could also mean outsourcing. In other words, an in-house service to separate the garbage.
Yeah, we either contract
But
or do it ourselves.
I would sooner have our employees doing what I think the future holds, even right now, and have them separating the garbage, than going and giving everybody or asking our residents to take out a degree on how to throw out your garbage because they don't know if a coffee stain has hit the wrong piece of paper or whether or not their straw is going to be accepted this week in their bin, as Councillor Pertsa highlights. So, for now, I want a report that says all of it. What's it going to cost us?
So it's beyond the concept of a sorting facility that you're looking at, because I think they call it a dirty MRF, is where they separate everything that's in the bin, regardless of what it is, into its streams, right? And it's a
there may be
laborious thing. I think that's the technical term, but I'm reading the motion as much broader than that. Is that the intent, to be much broader?
Yeah, if in-house could mean a system that actually separates right at curbside as well with a truck. Who knows?
Okay.
That might be possible too. I know that there are a number of different cities around the world that are trying to find a way to do this. So if there are systems out there, let's hear what they are and then make a decision long-term as to whether we want that, right?
Okay. I just want to, Councillor Perruzza, I just want to tell you, Councillor Mamalady, staff are making a suggestion, and I'm happy to move it as a friendly amendment or ask you if it can be incorporated.
The knife out again? Is the knife
Yeah,
out?
to alternative ways to collect and process waste in the future. That's their preference, is to reword that. I think that's because that gives us options.
That makes sense.
Okay, so that's a recommendation by staff. And Councillor Mamalady's happy with accommodating that into his motion.
I'm happy with that.
Okay, Councillor Perruzza, did you have a question for the mover?
I did, because now I'm like a little confused. So what you're suggesting is like something like having like a super bin, that where you put in your recycling, your organics, what would be considered garbage at any one time, into a super bin, and then somebody coming along and either separating it at the curb, like with magnets, or going through it or something, and or taking it and doing it at a facility like on conveyor belts. Is that what that means?
I don't recall me saying that.
Like a
what I would like to see are a number of different other options to stop the fees and the gouging of our residents and our taxpayers, to stop the pretend taxes that we're calling fees for garbage pickup, and for us to recognize that the system that we've laid out to all of our taxpayers is not working. And we could pretend like we're going to play around with this and we're going to find it all out, but at the end of the day, it's going to cost us even more billions of dollars, when we can probably figure out a system that may not cost us and may save us money in the long run.
But I guess just to say it again, right? I understand that the fees versus taxes versus stuff that we say, oh, you pay for this, and because it's not really part of the taxes, and moving away from that for just a second. So what does this mean? It means that like you just put everything in one bin, like organics, recycling, garbage, and have like once a week or maybe bi-weekly somebody coming and let's say either taking it or dealing with it, right? Is that what that means?
Again, this is the second time he's asking this question. I didn't say that that's the system I'm looking at. I'm saying I want to see from staff what types of systems are out there. All I know is that now we can't collect black plastic over white plastic, and we've got our manufacturing base. We have people that employ people to work in these establishments. And then I listened to Councillor Layton, who's now calling our taxpayers offenders. He's using this kind of language now, the offenders, like they've broken the law, they've done something incredibly wrong when they hire hundreds, if not thousands of people in their plants. You know, I want to stop this stuff that's going on, and I want us to deliver the service as a city, as it should be, and not ask our residents to start washing extra dishes because we're not allowed to have a coffee grind left in a jar or on a piece of paper, and then ruining the whole batch. It's getting ridiculous.
Madam Chair, I'm glad to have given him the opportunity to make the speech that he really wanted to make in the beginning and didn't do.
I like having you sit beside me, Anthony.
Yeah.
Question, because I want to make a point. I'm gonna vote for this, but I really don't fully understand the impacts of this. So in the end, I may not support it, or I may support it, but I'm gonna vote for it today because it seems reasonable. But I don't know the full implications of going down this road, because we already have the bins. We've invested, you know, significantly in the current system.
So the way I'm going to answer this question is, yesterday at licensing committee, there was an issue of prostitution in our spas, in these, you know, these wonderful holistics we've got. I arose this as an issue probably 8 years ago, and everyone down here laughed at me saying, no, we don't have a prostitution problem in this city. You know, why are you dealing with this? Why are you suggesting this? I can see this as a problem 5 or 6 or 7 years from now, Madam Chair, and I'm happy that you're supporting it, but this is going to be an issue 5, 6, 7 years down the road, and it's best that we know what our options are in front of us. So while I took a huge hit over those few years, front page and all of it, you know, brothels on the island, whatever the media wanted to say, at the end of the day, we're finally recognizing, including the auditor who did the audit on all this, that it's not working, that we got prostitution in our neighborhoods right beside our children. Not the same thing, but it's all garbage to me.
Okay, that was a very long response. Okay, so I think we're going to go to a vote now if the committee's ready. And we've got, the clerks have identified what goes where and what goes first. And so if you could put up the first motion. So this is the motion I presented, and all those in favor, that's unanimous, fantastic. That carries. The next motion is Councillor Carmichael Grebs. All those in favor? I think that's unanimous. What are you doing, Councillor Peruzza? Okay, but did you put your hand up for that one? Because I want to say it's for Carmichael Grebs? Okay, so it's unanimous. Okay, and then our last motion placed by Councillor Mamalady. All those in favor and against, and that carries. All right, so we need to adopt it as amended. The motion, I'll move that. All those in favor, that's unanimous. All right, that is that issue. So the next item is PW 28.9. I don't know, Councillor Francis Nunziata, if you had anything ready to release now, or because there are a number of deputants on this one as well, on the coffee pods.
No, the other one, I'm still waiting for a motion, but I was just wondering, for 2812, we only have 2 deputants. If we can deal with that one, that would be a pretty fast item. Okay, what does the committee think? I just want to do a quick check on if we go through lunch. So just to be clear, we right now have, I believe, we have car share coffee pods, and then the cycling network in Thorncliffe Park and Flemington, and then Councillor Nunziata's 2 items. So the motion apparently is coming on one of her items. So what would the committee like to do? Are people going to be here after lunch? I'm definitely here. You're here. Have we got a quorum? So Councillor Mamalady's here. And Councillor Perutz, are you here?
No, I won't be able to return.
You're not here after lunch. Okay, because I want to make sure we have quorum so we can finish this agenda today. Okay, so what would the committee like to do? Continue on or jump to another item? 28.13.
2812, no?
Oh, 2812? Oh, yes, you're right. Yeah, I was looking at the wrong page. So just go through the, okay. Yeah, we have on this next item on coffee pods, we have 3 deputations that have registered. So we'll just move ahead then. So 28.9, review of single-serve coffee pods in the City of Toronto's waste diversion program. We have 3 speakers. The first one is Monique Oxtender, and she is the, if you could come forward and get situated. She's the Chief Sustainability Officer with Keurig Green Mountain. You have a whole group? Yep. Whoever wants to come up can come up. Oh, there's 2 of you, is there? Okay, so do you want, you're going to present together. Okay, so there's also Marianne, is that correct? Okay, so you're also with the same partnership group. Okay, so you can, as soon as you're ready, you can start.
That is out there. So we've been meeting with the staff since June 1st of 2017, so almost a year now. In that same period of time, we've reached out to many of you on the committee as well. We absolutely remain committed to ongoing dialogue with both the staff and councillors around blue bin inclusion for recyclable coffee pods. What you have in Keurig is a willing and able partner, and we together have the opportunity to set a new collaboration model for producer responsibility in the province. I think it's evident from the reports that the staff has issued that the reality is we must do more, and we must do more now to increase diversion rates and decrease contamination. So how can Keurig help? There are various concerns and misinformation circulating about the recyclability of coffee pods. So I want to address those specifically, but also take a step back and look at good recycling behaviors, which lead to good quality material for reuse, so contributing to the circular economy. First off, adding coffee pods to the Blue Bin program should not increase processing costs. Given the discussion that we've just had, I want to point out that we have standardized within our company and our portfolio of pods, as well as recyclable coffee pods in general, to white and natural colors. So there has been a standardization effort speaking exactly to those learnings around colored plastics. We are converting specifically to number 5 polypropylene plastic for the recyclable pods because it is a highly valued plastic. It's already collected by the city as well as 94% of communities across Canada. And thus the pods then are additive to an existing material stream, which the local MRF under contract has the equipment to sort. As pointed out, the system here is among one of the most sophisticated in North America. So the city is well positioned in this regard, and domestic recyclers are advocating for the inclusion of recyclable pods to their recycling system. Second, adding coffee pods to the Blue Bin program should not also increase contamination. So the current contamination levels, which we've just discussed, are part of a much larger issue, unrelated to coffee pods at this point. That said, we do want to do our part to help minimize it as best as we can. We have not yet started promoting recyclable pods, and thus any contamination risk assessed is at this point conjecture. That being said, we are about to begin that proactive communication, and we've shared this with the city since our initial engagement in 2017. We're going to be starting that within the next few weeks. We have waited until the last possible responsible moment before promoting the recyclability of pods as we have introduced the product, and we're at a critical moment where we need to start creating the new behavior of recycling these pods. Creating a new behavior relative to recycling is most successful at product launch, so now is the time as we launch this product to create the recycling habit and to start accruing the environmental benefits of recycling. So as we begin our ad campaign, this campaign reflects commitment to effective consumer education, and it reflects the financial investment that we are willing and able to make to ensure that we're driving true behavioral change. So with that, I'm going to show you a quick social media video that's an example of how we're activating with consumers that's featuring the 3-step recycling process that we are advocating. perhaps. We might be having a little bandwidth issue on that. The point is we have these social media videos. Oh, here it goes. So it's a multifaceted campaign that includes advertising, social media, out-of-home placement, surrounding our consumer with an appropriate message around recycling. Now, this is a brand message, and it's fighting contamination before it can start. While our message and commitment to consumer education, I think, comes through quite clearly in what we're putting out into the marketplace, we really strongly believe that joint messaging coming from both Keurig and the city will ensure minimal contamination and help avoid confusion among consumers. We're doing this in conjunction with other municipalities who are leveraging our efforts, who are leveraging our dollars for not just a recycle your pod right message, but also a recycle right message. This is no different than other containers, jars, et cetera, that are being used in the home that have to be emptied before being recycled. I think unarguably brands have the loudest voice in the household. And so combining those voices for effective behavior change is where we need to head next. Now, from our perspective, the risk for confusion between recyclable and compostable pods will be minimal. Why? Because there's a visual difference and a visual identifier between the two, as you can see in the images that we have here. The other reason we feel like this confusion will be minimized is that across all major manufacturers, by the end of this year, 85% of all coffee pods in the marketplace will be recyclable and featuring consistent recycling instructions. The peel, empty, recycle. We believe that instructions, visual cues, and coupling that with consumer education efforts, including things like gamification and monetization in ways that we can speak to our consumer because we know her, we know what motivates him, we know how to reach specifically our consumer to change the behavior. We think that will be not only effective for behavior change, but also have the positive impact we're aiming for on the environment. Now, addressing an earlier point, why not compostable? It's worth just a second to point out that composting for plastics, bioplastics, is limited today. We are absolutely in favor of those options as the infrastructure develops. But just last week, the National Zero Waste Council issued a report that highlights the massive investment required before composting of packaging and products can be widely available, not just across Canada, but in this province as well. While we know that Stewardship Ontario has not yet stated whether coffee pods will be included in the amended Blue Box program plan, consultations in the fall did discuss non-acceptance of products without strong end markets. Now, at that point in time, coffee pods were primarily a number 7 plastic, which does not have a strong end market. By converting to polypropylene, which has such a high acceptance across Canada and in the province, and since then as well, Stewardship Ontario has released more recent proposals that recognize a universal acceptance of polypropylene. With these different developments, we hope that Stewardship Ontario will recognize the considerable positive environmental and economic impact that accepting recyclable coffee pods will have. So in close, as a producer, we've worked tirelessly over the last few years to develop a viable solution for Canada. We've collaborated closely with recycling and plastic industries to develop our recyclable pods, and we've also been working with municipalities across the country, and in fact across North America, to ensure various municipal stakeholders understand why our solution works and why it's the right one, with solid information and data behind that. Design for the circular economy for this solution is complete, so the work left in front of us and where we want to and look to collaborate with the city is relative to communication and actual collection of the pods. There's some fantastic tools that the city has used, from the Waste Wizard lookup tool to expanding from that 2016 Recycle Right campaign, that we feel that with combined efforts and a magnified voice, we can have the critical impact that needs to happen in this moment, not only to address better recycling, but more specifically to reduce contamination. In terms of the work, in terms of the work that we've done, I'm going to leave you with one last of our social media videos, and then we'll conclude.
As part of our sustainability commitment, we collaborated with Canadian recycling facilities to create our recyclable K-Cup pod. To test the recyclability, we attached temporary chips to K-Cup pods that allow us to track them through recycling facilities to see how many would find their way through the process. On average, 90% were successfully sorted and have the potential to be recycled, a number similar to other commonly recycled plastic containers. By the end of 2018, all certified Keurig K-Cup pods in Canada will be recyclable and will have a useful second life.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the presenters? Okay, go ahead. You want me to go? Well, I guess the question is that you probably were here for the item before, and you heard the councillors and staff talking about the confusion and how difficult it is for residents, consumers, whatever you want to call them from your perspective, consumers, for them to navigate the whole the waste stream and what goes where. So right now, actually, coffee pods in Toronto are not recyclable. Having said that, your product and your packaging says otherwise. And that is similar to, you know, in Lou's area or a former area, because now he's the acting DCM, but in water, same things with flushable wipes. Flushable wipes are not flushable. So it's a bit of a challenge for us as a city, as a municipality, to deal with companies that are, you know, have very strong brands, as yours does, and, you know, has this information on the bottom or at the side saying it is recyclable. So you can see the challenge we have, given the former report, and we're dealing with contamination, significant contamination in our waste stream. So my question to you is, you're aware that they have done waste audits and they have found pods in both the green and blue bins that shouldn't be there, because right now they're not supposed to be disposed, they're supposed to be disposed in the garbage stream. Are you aware of that they have done waste audits and the findings have been that they are going into the wrong bins?
We've read the report as issued.
Okay. I guess my second question to you is, would you be willing as a company to help fund testing or help fund the accommodation of these pods in the waste streams? Because taxpayers are paying for what maybe corporations should be funding. And that was the concept behind the extender responsibility that the province was handling, and now we have an election. It seems to have gone quiet, but I'm sure it'll resurface on some level after the election. But what do you think about that whole initiative around extender producer responsibility? What's your perspective?
We are a supporter, absolutely, of extended producer responsibility and an active participant. So we do pay into the Stewardship Ontario organization as a producer. I have been for a number of years. And we've taken it to a bit beyond that in the collaboration that we've reached out to both the City of Toronto as well as municipalities across the province to let people know what we were doing, how we were doing it, and take feedback throughout our processes, but also participating in the processes as offered by the stewardship organization and the cities and municipalities. So both ways. Great question on the testing. I think it's a wonderful one. We have been doing extensive testing since 2015 on our own dime. So that testing is with tens of thousands of pods. It was the ones referenced in the videos. We use RFID technology, and we are completely transparent with those results with both the facility. It's usually a two-way agreement with the facility itself. And in the case of Toronto, we were also transparent with the staff on the results of that test, and they attended themselves as well. So we have done the testing to date, and always happy to continue further explorations as needed so that we can all feel comfortable with an acceptance in the recycling bin.
Okay. Have you done, let's just zero in on your testing. So I understand you've done the testing, but have you done it in collaboration with the City of Toronto? Because as you know, every municipality, and this adds to the confusion, every municipality does things differently, a little bit differently. So Markham or Newmarket or Coburg or Guelph might just not accept this plastic lid or that, or they might accept, I know there's a couple of municipalities I think that do accept coffee pods. We don't. But it has to go, right now it has to go into the garbage, or should be going into the garbage. So have you actually collaborated with the City of Toronto municipality, because we are different from everybody else? Have you done testing with our team?
Yes, absolutely, Madam Chair. So as I mentioned, we began in June 1st of 2017 in terms of our outreach and trying to come to the table. We brought the idea of the test to the city. The city, we agreed on the parameters of the test, but they were not a formal participant in the test. Upon invitation to be so, it was declined. And so instead, it was a direct agreement with Canada Fibers, which is the MRF, or Material Recovery Facility, under contract with the city. And then the debrief, well, the staff did attend that test upon our invitation, although they declined being part of the formal agreement.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't think there's any other questions. Oh, Councillor Holyday had one, I forgot. Go ahead, Councillor Holyday.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for speaking to us today. And I suppose one of the things I've learned in life is sometimes you have to take a few steps and some directions to get where you want to go. Have you ever explored a take-back or a takeaway program? And I'll preface that with, I don't know if you're aware, we have environment days, 44 of them across the city, unless they're consolidated. Have you ever thought about talking to the city about perhaps having a take-back program at one of the environment days to kind of get the word out there about what you're doing and get people to start to think about this?
Thank you, Councillor. We do currently offer a take-back program within the business environment, so our B2B business. And the reason that we do that in that context is because we feel strongly it's important to meet the consumer where they are. So their use context. And in an office environment where you have high volume use, it makes sense both economically and environmentally to have a singular point of aggregation and shipment back. In terms of at the household level, what you typically see is large cost and very low participation because of the effort required to either ship or return to store, et cetera. So there are some barriers there that when we started on this journey, we said, if we need to go that way, we absolutely will. But if there's an opportunity to meet the consumer in their home, in their kitchen with curbside, then that's the route we'd like to go, which is why we started the testing in the first place and what it showed us immediately. But I do like your idea on the how do we profile what we're doing around events and things that are going on.
And I understand the end goal on that is at the household, but would you consider perhaps participation at Environment days, because that's 44 points of contact. It allows the city to answer the question if someone asks, what to do with these things. Well, maybe there's an opportunity to take them back at Environment Day to the manufacturer. Would that be something that would be of interest? And you don't have to answer me on the spot, but would it be something that you would consider? Because there is that opportunity to continue the work by participating at Environment Days.
I think profiling the solutions that we have at Environment Day is a fantastic idea.
It's different than actually taking back the items. And you don't have to answer me today, but would you consider actually doing a take back at the Environment Days, at least through a very interim cycle to see what happens, see if people are interested?
We would consider.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Our next speaker we've heard from before today. If you could come back up, and you've got 5 minutes again on this item. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be back. With me, I just want to introduce Claudio Giamiti, who's Senior Vice President now?
Close enough.
He's in charge of innovation for us, and he's actually been on the compostable pod process since the very beginning. I want to pick up on some points I made up under the previous agenda items, and I want to underline the progress that we are making with solid waste and have been making in finding a way forward that's going to work for Toronto residents who want to do the right thing with their single-serve pods. One element of that is the technical work, the testing work, and that's on track, and the report actually signals that. We expect to be testing at some point in the next few weeks. We're trying to iron out the details, but things are well on track. And our belief is that the test is going to be successful for one fundamental reason. And the previous speaker pointed out about the challenge that some composting operations have in terms of dealing with compostable bioresins and such. And that's true, that is a question that's been raised. The reality with the pod is 90% coffee. It's 90% coffee. It's not some plastic thing, it's coffee mostly. And moreover, since the city's barrier, since the city expects at least 88% of whatever gets processed to go through to meet their concerns, if it's 90%, we're pretty confident that there's every reason that that coffee will be going where it belongs, which is into your AD processing. I explained the simplicity and the convenience of our pod under the last agenda item. You go directly from the brewer to the green bin, ideally. Now, consumers love it, but that's not so much the issue for me here. Many of you may know of the work of the National Zero Waste Council. Councillor Layton, who was here before, in fact, is on its board, in fact. Recently, the National Zero Waste Council included our pod in its design portfolio, where they single out specific products that are seen as taking the entire life cycle into account and minimizing waste. So that's just one of the many, frankly, awards and accolades that we've gotten because people have seen this as being a useful direction forward. And indeed, as your previous speaker pointed out, NZWC did take a look at compostable products and packaging of all sorts, and they said, governments, producers, packaging manufacturers have to find a way to work together to sort out these issues. We're the first in that, and we support going that. We support that kind of cooperation. And that's why Claudio has been talking to our friends in solid waste for years now, for many years now, because this is our community too. We're here, we share their belief that the best approach is going to be a province-wide one, but until the province of Ontario decides to do something, we work with what we've got, which is what we've got here in the City of Toronto right now, and we want to make that process a success with them. So since Council made the initial motion that started this, which was back in October or so of 2016, we've worked with solid waste fairly continually to clarify their concerns. We ask concrete questions. We've been in a dialogue that's helped to really nail down what are they looking for, what do they need, what are the concerns that they have. So the report points out that they've identified policy concerns related to things like consumer education, producer responsibility, and we recognize those. And those are questions that we are committed to sort out with them. Clearly, we have to be part of that solution, and we are fully prepared to be part of that solution. A lot of details to work out, but we are absolutely prepared to go in that direction. And we've done it elsewhere. Councillor McMahon, for instance, was commenting when she was here about creamers and stuff in the green bin waste. We worked with a major composter that deals with a lot of industrial settings and office settings in Seattle. And in all of those places, people were throwing creamers, little stir sticks, all of that in the office composting. It was driving them nuts. We worked with them to have some in-office communication that essentially cleared up the problem for them as part of them accepting our compostable pods into those workplaces. It was a win for them, it was a win for us. It made things clearer and simpler for all the people in those workplaces. We've done it in Seattle, we're doing it elsewhere, and obviously we're doing it here. So, just to summarize then, we're a Toronto company with a Made in Ontario innovation that's won international awards, and we're committed to work with the city to address its concerns and ours, given the reality that Toronto is one municipality with a specific system, but that other municipalities are looking to for leadership so we can grow more jobs in the city than we've already done and bring more innovation to the marketplace.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Sorry, are you a producer of the plastic product or the coffee?
Yeah, we do the compostable pod. We roast the coffee, right, and then we put it into our compostable pods for a number of brands.
All right. And your product is not recyclable?
No, right now. We would never, ever suggest it should go anywhere near a blue box.
All right. So what do you do with it?
Compost.
Green bin.
Well, we believe strongly it should be officially approved in your green bin. The reality is many people are putting them in the green bins, as we all know. Your official line right now is it's supposed to go in the garbage.
So why should it go into the green bin?
Because it actually will bring all of that coffee into your organic waste stream, which is where your policy is. You want those things in your organic waste stream. That the compostable elements, the paper and such that are also in the pod, also break down and are likely, most of it at least, are likely to make its way into your anaerobic digestion system, so it's going to do anything. It's not going to have any negative impacts, and certainly not any negative impacts that are beyond the standard that staff set operationally anyway. I also point out, for instance, we've tested the pods, and as the previous speaker said, we've tested them lots of places. We've tested them in Peel, we've tested them in Guelph, we've tested them in Niagara, just finished testing them in Ottawa. And the thing that everybody says is, okay, it works, but we want something that's going to be accepted across all municipalities, starting with Toronto, right? So people keep saying, okay, yeah, it would work, but we won't put it in. But they're looking for Toronto.
Toronto has to be the example before anybody else does it.
I think, in fairness to them, I think mostly what they want is as common a set of messaging across all municipalities as possible. I mean, I think honestly they're thinking that if I hear a radio ad, and let's go back to the points we were talking about earlier about the communication that they do, those radio signals don't stop at the boundaries. So that's why.
I get it now. So I'm anxious to see what the city also has to say about that. But if we don't accept it in our bins, are you going to be shutting down anytime soon, or do you plan on continuing this product that many people love and have in their homes, right? I get that. So it's not going to stop anytime soon if we don't accept it, right? Or is it?
Obviously, the acceptance would help galvanize some of the relationships we have with the people we manufacture for, because, excuse me, they believe that their consumer really wants the solution. They want to do something about the waste problem, and they obviously want to have the advantage of making marketing claims against that or for that in support of their
You're telling me that, I mean, I go into people's homes regularly, I go into offices regularly, and these machines are everywhere. I go into a hotel room, and the hotel rooms have them in there. Are you telling me that if Toronto doesn't come down with a solution here, that all those people are going to stop doing business with you?
I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that we have what we believe is a great format that consumers really love. And the compostability element is just one part of it that deals with the end of life. And we believe that, you know, our success as a company in Toronto would be augmented with the support of people being actually able to do what they want to do with the product.
So your clients are going to keep ordering. You got a product that everybody wants and likes, including myself, by the way. And it's easy. It's what consumers want. We have the city who has to figure out what to do here. And even if they choose not to do anything, your product is just going to end up in where?
I would suspect it's going to do, in real life, I suspect two things. There will be a certain number of people who will continue to put it in the green bin in the belief that it works.
And it's going to cost the city more money to figure out how to deal with it after they sort it out themselves out of the bin. Isn't it just best that we realize how to best fit your product into our system at this point?
Well, and that's why we're talking to solid waste. I think that they actually, from our perspective, they get that that's an issue, and we have to, because there is that real world. People are buying these things, and you can't just wish them away, obviously, and they know that. So the question is, what works best, and what's going to be most effective in terms of clearing up everything for everybody involved? And frankly, so the brands who work with us can say to consumers, look, this is a great product that does work in your green bin, no matter where you live.
Thank you.
My understanding is also coffee grounds can go in your garden and kind of enhance your Is that true, or?
Oh, sure. I mean, if you, yeah, lots of people do that, and they'll, for instance, our coffee company doesn't just do pods. We do all, like, literally bags of coffee, beans,
Yeah, you
coffee.
do every meeting.
Yeah, lots of people do that. That's absolutely.
Once they're used. Okay, and you don't happen to have one of your coffee pods here?
No.
No, okay, that's all right. I've seen it before, so.
You saw the picture, actually, in the previous presentation.
Yeah, I did see it. So is there not one of the pieces of material, is it not? It's all recyclable, every bit of it? Or
Everything,
compostable,
yes,
compostable?
the thing you're probably thinking about is the ring that holds it in.
Exactly.
That ring is made out of a variety of bio-based materials. One of the key ingredients is coffee chaff, which is the skin of a coffee bean. So we roast how many tons of coffee a day?
A lot.
And all of that, ever since coffee, it's like a skin of a peanut, huh?
Right.
And it comes off, and forever in the coffee industry, it was waste. Okay, it was garbage. And so what we discovered through research with the University of Guelph, you could take that stuff and work it, and it looks like plastic, but it's not.
It does.
And what it does, and the great thing about that coffee chaff, which is about a quarter of that, plus along with different kinds of grasses and materials like that, it actually accelerates the breakdown process, because the little microbes that you need to actually do composting, and it's different than the system they have, love that stuff. So in fact, it accelerates the process.
Okay. Okay, I'm not sure, I'll have to ask staff additional questions about that. And then, again, I'll ask you the same question I asked the former manufacturer. Are you willing to play a role in paying for some of the testing? I think you've been kind of involved in that, and also paying for the fact that it's in the waste stream in Toronto versus residents paying for it?
For years, we have said that we were willing to do our part. We want to make sure that we're not disadvantaged vis-a-vis the competition, but
Yes.
we have always said, we have said this, the first time we were asked was 2014, 2015, and we said then, and we say now, we are absolutely prepared to be part of this.
Okay, thank you. I think there might be another question. Councillor Holladay, did you have questions?
Yeah, I wondered if you could give me your perspective, because I think if I remember the report right, there is a problem with that plastic ring for our processes, because our processes are biodigestion. So the report talks about the separation of plastics from the mush, I'll call it, that goes into the biodigester. So we skim that stuff off, and I think there were questions about how successful we would be with skimming the rings off. I wondered if you could offer comment on any experience that you've got so far on that, and I think there's even a discussion here about conducting a test on that.
Yeah, so I'll take each, actually I'll do the test part first, that we've been in discussions with solid waste. They've provided a test methodology. We've got some questions. We're meeting next week actually to ideally iron out the final bits and pieces so we can actually do the test. Now, one of the things to keep in mind about what solid waste is looking for as a criterion of success here is that there be no more than 12% of the weight of the pod is skimmed off for whatever reason, right? Be it plastic or what have you. First of all, as I pointed out, 90% of the weight of the pod is coffee. So, and we know enough about how the hydropulper works that realistically what's going to happen is that pod's sitting there and it's going to get essentially shredded, right? And certainly the filter on it's going to shred. So right away you get all the coffee in the system, all right? The filter itself is compostable, so that's going to shred into little bio-based pieces. It should go on. The paper top, the lid that's on the top of it, that's, as I say, mostly paper and some other compostable stuff. That's probably going to come apart. The ring may or may not completely come apart, but at that point we're talking like 4 or 5% of the total weight of the pod. So it's well under the operational criterion that solid waste has set for us. And even many of those pods might well, or those rings may well just break up in that pre-processing that they've got.
Okay, I'll just ask committee, because we're 3 minutes away from the formal lunch recess. If you want to continue to finish this item, we do have to come back we have 4 remaining items after lunch at 1:30. But would you like to continue with this item or just continue it after lunch? So if, in that case, we need a motion. We need a motion. Oh, well, Councillor Lee moved a motion to continue. All those in favor? I guess I'll vote with you. Opposed? Okay, so we're going to recess, but if we could just, can we move Councillor Nunziata's motion, and then we get rid of
It
one
will be a
item?
quick item because the staff
Okay.
have sent me the motion.
Okay, so,
28.6.
PW 28 thank you very much. PW 28.6, sewer system flood reduction measures in Rockfield. Rockcliffe, I'm
Cliff.
sorry. Stephen Holiday, Councillor Holiday had held that for Councillor Nunziata. There's a motion, if the clerk could put it on the screen. This is the motion, which I think has been written by staff, if I'm not correct. Am I correct, Madam Speaker? That's been written by staff. All those in favor? Is it there? This has been written by staff, correct?
Yes.
All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay, 3 items left. Continuation of 28.9 coffee pods, and then 3 items left. And we'll see everybody at 1:30. Okay, go. Oh, I think, Stephen Holiday should sign that.